Good evening, friends, and welcome to Dark Historian. Tonight, I've brought you a quiet, calming tale, a gentle bedtime, sleep story for wakeful minds and wandering hearts. This video is part of the Boring History for Sleep Stories series, made to help you unwind and fall asleep fast. In this episode, I'll share soothing sleep stories that invite your thoughts to slow down and your body to let go. If your mind is still busy, or if peace feels far away, you've found the right place. So gently close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let these sleep-inducing chronicles of history carry you into rest. You're silent. Night begins now, with Dark Historian. Story 1, The Rust Beneath the Plate. A night's morning routine before battle. Good evening, friend. As you settle into the softness of your blanket, I invite you to imagine a dim candle flickering in the corner of a cold stone chamber. The walls smell of damp earth and soot, and the faint echo of distant footsteps bounces off the rough surfaces. Tonight, we will wander slowly, very slowly, through the quiet hours before a medieval knight rises for battle, the kind of morning that was more routine than heroic, more mundane than glorious. You may think of knights as glittering figures, galloping boldly across green fields, but before any charge, before any clash of sword and shield, there was an awkward, tender ritual of waking. You're there now, a ghost at the foot of a narrow straw mattress, watching him stir under a thin woolen blanket. The knight's eyelids twitch first, heavy with fatigue from a restless night. Sleep, for him, is a luxury rarely enjoyed fully. His dreams are haunted by debts owed to lords, by the nagging ache in his shoulder from a past joust, and by the constant fear of betrayal. The chill of the early morning seeps into his bones before he even opens his eyes. The mattress beneath him is nothing more than a sack stuffed with straw and the odd tuft of sheep's wool. Fleas dance in the folds, tickling his skin. He scratches lazily, more from habit than any hope of relief. A huff of his breath rises into the cold air, visible like a small ghost departing his lips. Above him, a narrow arrow slit allows in a pale thread of dawn light. Outside, you can almost hear the distant shuffle of servants beginning their day, the clang of buckets, the clatter of wooden spoons, the low hum of stable boys greeting the horses. Before rising, he mutters a quiet prayer. It is not a poetic or elaborate prayer, just a soft mumbled plea to avoid death that day, to return home with bones unbroken and face unscarred. He crosses himself roughly and then swings his feet to the floor, planting them on uneven flagstones, as cold as the iron heels soon wear. The first thing he reaches for is a simple linen shirt, stiff from days of sweat and dirt. The fabric rasps against his fingers as he tugs it over his head. You can almost feel the rough seams scraping his shoulders. He shivers slightly, but there is no time to coddle warmth. Next, the knight pulls on his shoes, those long, hose-like garments that protect the legs beneath armor. They are woolen, prickly, and smell faintly of lanolin and old smoke. He ties them carefully at the thigh, his fingers clumsy from the morning chill. One knot, then another. A small tremor of frustration flickers across his face when the knot slips loose. He tries again. Then comes the padded gambeson. This is the knight's secret second skin, an under-armor jacket thickly stuffed with linen or horsehair. Its job is to soften the punishing bite of metal. He shrugs into it slowly, as though donning a heavy memory rather than a piece of clothing. Each tug and lace sends small jolts of discomfort along his back, reminding him of every scar and bruise. Acquired over years, a squire, a young boy, still blinking sleep from his eyes, appears now, carrying pieces of polished steel. His arms shake under the weight. The knight grunts an acknowledgement, but there are no cheerful greetings. Words in the morning are saved for orders and warnings. Piece by piece, the squire helps. Him they begin with the greaves, which shield the shins, each piece buckled tight against woolen shows. You watch as the squire fumbles slightly, earning a low sigh from his master. The boy's hands are raw and cracked from endless hours cleaning and oiling these heavy pieces. The night before, next, the sabaton's metal shoes, designed to protect the knight's feet. The clink of buckles and rings is rhythmic, like an old song. The knight wiggles his toes inside, wincing slightly. Each footstep today will carry the weight of not just iron, but expectation. Cuirass and backplate follow, enclosing his chest like a cold, echoing coffin. The metal hums with each breath he draws. Beneath the plates, sweat already begins to bead. On his skin, despite the cold air, PAULDRONS come next. The large shoulder pieces that limit movement and lend an almost statuesque quality. Every slight motion of his arms now carries a mechanical clatter, a reminder of his transformation from man to metal beast. When the knight lifts his arms to adjust a strap, you see his underarms chafed, small lines of irritated red where padding fails to protect him. He does not complain. Complaints are a luxury for poets and courtiers. The final piece, the helmet. It rests on a wooden stand beside the bed, its surface pocked and scratched from previous encounters. Before he dons it, he stares into its hollow. Eyes slit, as though confronting an old friend or a silent judge. Inside, the smell is sharp, a mix of iron, old leather, and stale breath. When he finally lowers it over his head, the world outside shrinks to two narrow slits and the muffled echo of his own breath. Now fully armored, the knight rises slowly, each joint creaking. He takes one or two tentative steps, feeling the tug, then pinch of straps. The squire hovers nearby, eyes darting for any sign of disapproval. Nearby, the knight's sword waits. Its blade is clean, but not gleaming. Real battle swords rarely glimmer like they do in tapestries. Instead, they carry small nicks, tiny stories of each clash. He lifts it, testing its balance. His arm flexes subtly, the sinew straining beneath. Layers of gambeson and plate. Before stepping out, he takes a moment at a wooden shrine by the door. There, a small wooden cross leans precariously beside a dried sprig of rosemary. He murmurs another prayer, this one for his family, for the land, for the horse waiting in the courtyard. Finally, he exits into the corridor. The floor is uneven. Water from a recent rain drips from cracks in the ceiling. You can almost hear the water splashing softly on stone. Other knights shuffle past, each a mirror of heavy breathing and anxious hearts hidden under iron shells down in the great hall. Servants scurry like mice, preparing a meager breakfast. A hunk of coarse bread, a wedge of hard cheese, and a cup of thin ale. There's no feast today, only the dull necessity of calories before combat. He eats mechanically, eyes fixed on the wall, as if reading invisible runes. You notice his jaw, working slowly, careful not to crack another tooth on the dense bread. Occasionally, he glances at his companions, some praying under their breath, some staring into nothing, each man alone with his dread. From the hall, a draught sneaks in, carrying the smell of manure and distant smoke. Outside, the horses snort and shift in the courtyard. The knight stands abruptly, the bench creaking beneath him. A servant rushes to remove his empty plate. The knight steps outside into the pale morning. A gentle fog clings low, curling around hooves and armored feet like hesitant ghosts. The squire follows close, holding a helmet and a small pouch inside. A token from his lady, perhaps a small ribbon or a sprig of lavender meant to guard against fear. They approach the horse. It's a massive creature, broad-chested and restless, its eyes rolling slightly at the sight of steel. The knight places a hand on its flank, feeling the warmth, sharing a silent moment of mutual dependence. He mounts awkwardly, the weight of armor making the movement graceless and heavy. The squire stands below, ready to catch a boot if needed. Atop the horse, the knight becomes part of a larger machine, man and beast, now a single breathing tower of iron. He shifts, checking straps, feeling the stirrups bite into his arches. The courtyard slowly fills with knights and their retinues, the low murmur of final preparations swelling like a distant tide. No grand fanfare, no blaring trumpets, yet only the quiet, methodical sound of men preparing to face each other. Perhaps for the last time, the commander appears, giving soft, curt instructions, positions, formations, timing. The knight listens, but his mind drifts to the shape of his wife's hands, to the warmth of a fire on a winter night, to the sound of a lute on some long-forgotten feast day. The squire adjusts the knight's sword belt one last time. The boy's fingers tremble, his lips moving in a silent prayer. The knight rests a gauntleted hand on the boy's shoulder. Briefly a gesture of thanks, or perhaps an unspoken goodbye. You sense the finality in the air. Each knight carries a private fear hidden behind iron masks and heavy crests as you breathe. Softly under your blanket tonight, imagine that morning fog curling around your toes, the cool dampness of the courtyard stones beneath your feet. Hear the muffled heartbeat inside the helmet, the echo of your own breath filling the void in these quiet, hidden mornings. The legends of knights are stripped down to shivering men, two raw nerves, two small rituals, and heavy silences. And so we end this first section with a soft thought. How many mornings have slipped by in forgotten stone chambers, while the world outside only remembered the clang of swords and the splash of blood. Sleep, friend, on that question as we drift further into these lost hours. Welcome back, dear friend. Let's step softly into the next layer of this quiet morning world, where heavy armor squeaks in the mist and whispered prayers hang in the chill air like fragile threads. Imagine you are still wandering just behind. The knight, unseen, unnoticed, as he makes his final preparations before the call to battle echoes across the fields. The horse beneath him shifts restlessly, hooves scraping the muddy courtyard ground. You can almost hear the subtle snap of leather straps being tightened, the gentle cough of a stable hand, the snort of a nervous warhorse inhaling the scent of iron and sweat. The knight leans forward slightly, adjusting the weight on his saddle. Every movement sends a ripple of discomfort through his spine, pressed as it is against metal and wool dot around him. Other knights sit on their mounts, each a small island of solitude despite their proximity. Some exchange clipped words, some remain still and silent, eyes hidden under visors. The air smells of horse breath, wet straw, and the faint, acrid tang of morning fires burning low in distant hearths. A herald passes by, shouting final orders from the commander. The words feel distant, like a faraway storm you can hear in your dreams. Line up at the east gate, hold formation, wait for the signal. The knight listens without truly hearing, his mind drifting once again to the warmth of his hearth, the soft weight of his child's hand curled around his finger, the rustling of linen sheets when the world felt safe and small. The squire scurries forward one last time, holding a small water skin. The knight tips it beneath his helmet, careful not to spill. The water tastes slightly of leather and ash, but he drinks deeply anyway, knowing it might be his last chance to quench his thirst today. A thin trickle escapes and runs down his chin, disappearing into the padded collar. A final blessing from the resident priest, a bent man with sunken cheeks and a voice that cracks with age. He moves quickly down the line, touching each knight's helmet with a rough wooden cross. The knight closes his eyes when he feels the cross press against the steel dome. In that instant, the sounds around him fade. He might be anywhere, in a small village church, at the edge of a forest, or beside a stream where he once learned to fish as a boy. When he opens his eyes, the priest is gone, already moving to the next line. The knight glances at the horizon, pale and trembling with the first glow of dawn. Thin, ragged clouds float like tattered banners. In the distance, you can just make out the shapes of small farmhouses, their thatched roofs still dark with dew. Somewhere, a rooster cries, as if mocking the armored men for their heavy seriousness. The knight shifts again, feeling the saddle bite into his thighs. The armor presses against his ribs, making each breath feel shallow and constricted. He looks down at the squire, who is now packing away spare straps, extra buckles, and a small pouch of oats for the horse. The boy's face is pale and drawn tight with fear. The knight wants to say something, to offer comfort, but words fail him. Instead, he manages a slow nod, the only gift he has left to give. A muffled horn sounds from the wall. The commander raises his gauntlet hand, and like ripples in a pond, the line of knights stirs to life. One by one, they urge their horses forward, hooves clopping over the uneven stones of the courtyard and out through the heavy wooden gate. The knight follows, feeling the movement of the horse echo up into his hips and spine. Beyond the gate lies a gentle slope leading down to an open field. The grass is wet and glimmers silver in the morning light. Tiny flowers, daisies, and buttercups sway under the trampling hooves, their quiet lives ending in an instant, unseen by anyone but you. The knight's horse snorts and tosses its head, catching the scents carried on the breeze, fresh-turned earth, distant fires, the musky smell of other horses and men. The knight pats its neck clumsily, his metal glove a poor substitute for a soothing hand. As they ride, the knight recalls earlier campaigns, the taste of grit in his teeth on windy days, the endless nights spent under a sagging tent, the steady drip of rainwater through worn seams. He remembers the faces of men who never returned, the ones who laughed loudest around the cooking fires but vanished silently in the mud. He remembers the kitchen before one campaign, the aroma of onions frying in tallow, the hurried last meal, shared on benches worn smooth by hundreds of soldiers. Women leaned over the pot, ladling thin stew into wooden bowls. An old woman pressed a dried sprig of lavender into his hand, muttering something about protection. He had tucked it into his pouch, where it remained for years, crumbling to dust without ever saving a single drop of blood in the present. His horse slips slightly on the damp grass, snapping him back to now. He shifts his weight to steady the beast, feeling the cold bite of his armor against his flesh. Nearby, a knight mumbles a curse under his breath. Another leans forward as though whispering a final confession to his mount. They reach a shallow creek at the field's edge. The water babbles softly, a sound so gentle it feels out of place among the clatter of metal and the heavy breathing of men and beasts. One by one, the knights cross, their horses hesitant at first, then splashing forward, sending small arcs of water into the morning air. The knight watches the ripples fan out and fade. He feels an unexpected pang of tenderness for the creek, for its small, patient stones and pale reeds bending under the current. In that moment he almost envies the water, how it simply flows, unhindered by crests, duties, and iron shells. On the far side, a line of young archers waits, shifting nervously. Their tunics are patched and faded, their quivers filled with arrows fletched in mismatched feathers. One boy looks no older than 15. He fidgets with the string on his bow, cheeks pale, his breath puffing like small clouds in the cool air. The knight meets his eyes briefly. There is a silent exchange, two souls seeing each other without words. The boy looks away first, staring down at the grass, perhaps imagining his mother's face, or a warm bowl of porridge that now feels as distant as the moon. The commander rides ahead, signaling for positions to be taken. Slowly, deliberately, the knights form a loose line on the crest of a small hill. Below them lies the opposing field, where the enemy force is rumored to gather. Yet in this moment, the field is empty, quiet, filled only with mist and the soft breath of the morning. The knight draws his sword partially, checking its edge. The blade sighs as it leaves the scabbard, then shivers as it slides back. He grips the hilt with a firmness, born not of bravado, but of necessity, a silent agreement with fate. He looks down at the squire again, who now stands far behind, clutching a spare shield. The boy's knuckles are white, his lips move in. Silent prayer. In another life, he might have been a shepherd, a baker, a monk tending garden herbs. But here he stands, a trembling witness to the moment before the first clash. The knight lifts his head, scanning the field. In the distance, he notices a few crows hopping among the grass, searching for worms or seeds, oblivious to the heavy hearts gathering above them. He watches them for a long while, letting the world blur at the edges. A distant horn sounds, a low, mournful note that rolls over the hill like a slow wave. The horses snort and sidestep. The line of knights stiffens, each man sinking deeper into his private thoughts. The knight feels his heart thud once, twice, heavy in his chest, echoing against the plates like a distant drum. He tightens his grip on the reins, feeling the leather creak. His horse's ears flick back, catching small sounds. A cough, the jingle of a bridle, the nervous whinny of another steed. The knight exhales slowly, trying to steady himself. Somewhere below, a flash of movement, a glint of steel, the flicker of a banner. The enemy approaches, though they remain little more than phantoms in the mist. The knight blinks, as though trying to clear a dream from his eyes. Another horn, sharper this time. The commander rides along the line, shouting orders now, his voice strained and urgent. The knight listens, but feels as though he is underwater, every word muffled, each moment stretched and softened. He thinks of his small chamber, again the straw mattress, the arrow slit with its pale morning light, the wooden cross beside the rosemary sprig. He wonders if the bed remains undisturbed, if the morning sun has finally climbed high enough to warm the stone floor. Then he thinks of the squire. The boy's face rises in his mind, pale and earnest. He hopes the boy will remember to feed the horse tonight, to keep the armor oiled, to find a quiet place to pray. As the final horn sounds, signaling readiness, the knight feels an almost painful longing to return to small, forgotten mornings, to hear the chirp of sparrows before sunrise, to taste warm bread with honey, to watch the kitchen cat chase a mouse along the hearth. He raises his sword slowly, a mechanical gesture that feels both ancient and inevitable. The line of knights shifts forward, hooves grinding into the damp earth, steel brushing steel. The mist begins to break under the rising sun, revealing shapes below, shields, pikes, ragged banners trembling like frightened birds. The knight urges his horse forward, feeling each stride like a distant heartbeat. Behind his visor, his breath grows ragged, each exhale a ghost against the cold metal. His fingers tighten round the sword hilt, the leather wrapping digging into his palm. And in that breath, before the clash, when the world holds its final, trembling pause, he feels more alive than in any feast hall, any courtly dance, any midnight prayer. Welcome back, dear listener. You are still here, standing in the hush just before the storm, beside our knight. Feel your breath slow as the mist coils around horse hooves and metal edges. Let each moment stretch and unfurl like a pale dawn, slowly revealing a sleeping village. The knights move forward, hooves sucking at the damp earth. The sound is not a thunderous charge yet. Rather, it is a cautious, creaking tide, a slow dance with dread. The knight's hands sweat inside his gauntlets, and the salty moisture begins to itch along his knuckles. He tries to ignore it, his focus instead narrowing to the wavering shapes of the enemy lines ahead. Through the slit of his visor, he catches fleeting images. A fluttering banner caught on a breeze, a man's cloak flaring as he runs to join his comrades, a line of pikes trembling like reeds in a winter pond. All these shapes blend into a shifting grey tapestry, each thread woven with fear and fragile resolve. As the knight's horse plods forward, he feels the animal's ribs move beneath his legs. Each breath the horse takes becomes a silent conversation, a reminder of shared vulnerability. The knight whispers to it under his breath, just a small hum in the helmet. Words that mean nothing and everything. Steady, steady, my friend. The first command to lower lances echoes down the line. Slowly, reluctantly, each knight lifts his heavy arm, shifts in his saddle, and brings the lance down. The tips point forward, catching stray beams of sun, momentarily turning them into cold, glinting needles. The knight's arm trembles under the lance's weight. In training, these moments felt like rituals, practiced, controlled, contained. But here, each vibration of the wood travels up into his shoulder, a raw reminder that the next few heartbeats might be his last. Ahead, the enemy line has begun to move. The two waves slide toward each other, two tired creatures bound to collide by the ancient gravity of ambition and survival. You can almost hear the collective breath of hundreds of men being held, that soft vacuum before the crush. The knight feels the horse gather beneath him, muscles coiling like ropes under tension. And then, with a suddenness that steals the breath, the horn blares one final time, and the line explodes forward. The world collapses into a tunnel of noise. Hooves slam into earth. Lances shatter on shields. Metal grinds against metal. The knight's heart rattles against his ribs, faster than the clatter of his helmet against his gorget. The scream of a horse cuts through the air, a sharp, almost human wail. He feels a sudden jolt. His lance strikes something solid. Splinters burst. The shock. reverberates up his arm so sharply he thinks the bone might crack. He releases the stump of the lance and instinctively reaches for his sword. Around him, chaos blooms like a dark flower. Men fall, horses rear and buck, shields shatter into wooden petals. Through narrow slits he catches glimpses, a squire dragged, away by his tunic, a knight stumbling to his knees, hands flailing in the mud. The knight raises his sword just in time to parry a wild swing. The blades shriek against each other, sparks leaping like tiny frightened birds. He counters, feels the blade bite into flesh, and an unexpected warmth sprays across his gauntlet. His breath catches. A second man rushes toward him, swinging a mace. The knight pivots awkwardly, the weight of his armor slowing each motion like he's swimming through deep water. He catches the mace on his shield, the impact rattling his entire body. He pushes forward, shoves the attacker back, and swings, his sword low, catching the man's leg. Each movement feels detached, as though he watches himself from above, a puppet lashed to strings of duty and fear. Somewhere in his mind, he repeats a small mantra taught by an old master at arms. Breathe, move, watch the edge. A sudden blow catches his shield edge, jerking his arm back violently. He loses balance and nearly slips from the saddle. The horse sidesteps, nickers sharply, its eyes rolling white. The knight clamps his knees, regains posture, lifts his sword again. All around him, the sound of battle is a brutal symphony, metal clanging, men shouting or moaning, horses shrieking, the deep, wet thud of weapons meeting flesh. But there are softer sounds too, if you listen carefully. The whimper of a squire searching for his knight. The hush of an arrow as it slices the air. The desperate gurgle of a man trying to call for his mother. In one fleeting moment, he glimpses the enemy. Commander, his plume tall and swaying. The knight pushes toward him, weaving through bodies and broken spears. The commander notices him. Their eyes lock for an instant, a silent agreement to meet fate together. They clash. The knight's first strike is deflected. The commander counters, narrowly missing the knight's cheek. Another swing, another parry. They are close enough to smell each other's breath, rank, sour, thick with fear and last night's ale. The knight feints left, then drives his sword forward. The blade slides under the commander's arm. The man's eyes widen in shock. He tries to speak, but only a wet gasp escapes. The knight pulls the sword free. The commander crumples, his plume sagging into the mud. A hush seems to fall around them, though in truth the chaos continues unbroken. The knight sits still, breath sawing in and out, his visor fogging with each exhale. His sword drips steadily. In that fragile pause, he looks around at the broken lances, the trampled banners, the bodies sprawled like discarded dolls. A soft drizzle begins to fall, mixing blood and earth into a dark, sticky paste. The droplets tap gently on his helmet, a quiet rhythm that feels almost comforting. He lowers his sword slowly, arm trembling from exhaustion and shock. In the distance, the enemy line begins to collapse, men running, some dropping shields to lighten their flight. A few stand defiantly, too proud or too frightened to flee. Raising swords against the inevitable, the knight nudges his horse forward cautiously. Each step feels monumental, as though he moves through honey. He passes a fallen comrade, the man's eyes open to the sky, lips slightly parted as though mid-lullaby. The knight wants to stop, to close those eyes, but his gauntlets feel too clumsy. To foreign dot further on, he finds his own squire, miraculously alive but kneeling, head bowed. The boy looks up, eyes wide and wet. Without thinking, the knight reaches down and places a heavy, shaking hand on the boy's head. No words come. There is nothing to say that could hold this moment. Together they remain still as the field quiets. The echoes of battle fade into the drizzle. Somewhere, a crow caws, breaking the fragile silence. The knight finally dismounts, stumbling as his feet hit the uneven ground. His knees threaten to buckle, the armor now an unbearable cage. He lifts his visor and breathes deeply, the air sharp and cold against his fevered skin. The squire rises slowly, offers an unsteady arm. The knight accepts it, leaning for balance. They stand together, two small souls in a sea of scattered armor. And mud nearby, a small group of survivors begin gathering the wounded. You see them move carefully, lifting limp bodies, laying them on makeshift stretchers of cloaks and broken shields. A priest kneels, offering final blessings to those beyond. Saving, the night watches, each scene imprinting on him like a brand. He feels his heartbeat slow, each pulse heavy and echoing through his tired limbs. He turns his gaze to the horizon, where the drizzle blurs the edge of the world. In that distance, he imagines a small kitchen fire crackling, the smell of herbs. Steeping in a clay pot, the creak of a wooden door closing softly against the wind. He wonders if someone there might be thinking of him now, or if his memory is already dissolving into the morning mist. After a while, he sheathes his sword, the motion deliberate and final. The blade scrapes lightly against the scabbard, a thin whisper of metal on leather. He rests his hands on the pommel, head bowed. The squire stands close, fingers trembling at his side. He keeps glancing up at the knight, waiting for an order. That never comes. Finally, the knight lifts his gaze, his eyes meeting the boy's. No words pass between them, only a slow nod. The boy nods back, and together they begin to walk, one slow, creaking step at a time, toward the makeshift camp forming at the field's edge. As they move, the knight's mind drifts once more. He thinks of the rust forming even now on his breastplate, the slow gnawing that will claim the shine before long. He thinks of the delicate care needed to oil each joint, the quiet hours spent in flickering candlelight with a rag and a pot of grease. He imagines that tonight he might finally rest his weary head on the straw mattress, perhaps find a moment of dreamless sleep. He pictures the small wooden cross by the door, the rosemary sprig drying in the draught, the unseen spider weaving its web in the corner. Small, soft witnesses to his solitude. The drizzle thickens into a gentle rain, washing thin rivulets of mud and blood across the field. Each drop lands softly, pattering on helmets, splashing into hoofprints. Dissolving the last sharp edges of battle, the knight walks on, step after step, his boots heavy and sucking at the sodden ground. He feels every ache, every bruise, each echo of the morning's tension still locked in his bones. Yet there is also a strange, deep quiet inside him now, a hollow space left by the clash, filled only with breath and the slow beat of his heart. As you lie in your warm bed, breathing deeply, think of this final moment. A night stripped of glory and song, simply moving forward through the soft rain, dreaming of warmth, of bread, of unremarkable mornings long forgotten. Story 2, the cold embrace of the chainmail, dressing at dawn in a damp, keep good evening once more, kind friend. I invite you now to step away from the muddy fields and the echoes of battle cries, and wander instead into a grey dawn inside. the stone belly of an ancient keep. Imagine you are standing in a narrow corridor that smells faintly of wet wool, burning tallow and mossy stone. It is the hour before sunrise, that liminal space where night breathes its last sigh and morning hesitates on the threshold. The walls around you are rough and damp, beads of condensation gathering in slow rivulets that trickle into cracks. Along the floor, you can hear the distant sound of water dripping into a forgotten barrel somewhere below. At the far end of the corridor, there is a small chamber, the kind that belongs not to a king or a lord, but to a knight of moderate standing, one respected enough to have his own room, yet humble enough that it lacks warmth or luxury. The doorway is framed by a rough-hewn lintel, its edges smoothed only by the soft brush of passing cloaks and hands over decades. Inside, a narrow cot huddles against one wall, its thin straw mattress sagging in the middle, suggesting countless restless nights. A coarse woolen blanket lies crumpled at the foot, evidence of a man who rose before the dawn fully arrived. A small wooden chest sits at the foot of the bed, its iron lock rusted, a testament to secrets no one bothers to steal. A single candle flickers on a small stool, its wax puddling slowly into a hardened skirt. The flame sputters each time astray. Draught slips in from the hall. Its glow casts long, shivering shadows that crawl across the stone walls like silent phantoms. Beside the bedstands, a figure, the knight, leaning slightly forward, shoulders tense beneath a rough linen undershirt. His breath hangs in the chill air, each exhale a fragile cloud dissolving into the gloom. His fingers fumble with the ties at the collar, tugging them closed against the morning's bite. You can almost feel the rawness of his fingertips, cracked, from years of pulling reins, wielding sword hilts, and tightening endless buckles. The linen clings to his back, damp with the night's sweat, and he winces as a cold breeze snakes along his spine. At the edge of the chamber, a young squire kneels, carefully laying out each piece of his master's chainmail. The squire's breath comes in small puffs, and his thin woolen tunic does little to guard against the creeping cold. You see the tremor in his hands as he lifts a mail coif, a heavy hood of interlinked iron rings. He handles it as if it were a living thing, laying it out reverently on a folded scrap of cloth. The knight casts a weary glance downward, his eyes shadowed by long nights and the weight of expectation. You can almost hear his thoughts, worries about the day ahead, doubts gnawing at the edge of his mind like mice in the dark. Yet, there is no room for complaint here. The squire stands and brings forward the first piece, the hauberk, a long tunic of chainmail. Its rings glimmer faintly in the candlelight, each link a silent witness to countless small labours. The blacksmith's hammer, the riveter's awl, the slow rhythmic tapping that forged protection from 1,000 tiny loops. The knight braces himself, leaning against the rough wall. He lifts his arms slowly as the squire slides the hauberk over his shoulders. You can almost hear the faint metallic hush as the rings slide over the linen, a quiet waterfall of iron droplets cascading down his arms and chest. Once settled, the hauberk presses heavily on his shoulders, drawing a sharp hiss from his lips. He rolls his neck, the sound of shifting rings like a bag of coins spilled onto a wooden table. Beneath the mail, his linen underlayer begins to soak up the condensation, the fabric growing heavier with each breath. The squire adjusts the hauberk carefully, tugging it down so it rests evenly. The knight shifts his feet, finding his center, again under the new weight. Outside, somewhere in the distant courtyard, a rooster begins its morning cry, a harsh, cracking sound that bounces off the cold stone walls. The squire moves to retrieve the shoals of mail, the leggings that will soon encase the knight's thighs and calves. The metal is cold, biting at the skin despite the woolen shows worn underneath. He bends to strap them on, leather cords cinched tight, each knot pressed firm against bone. You can see the knight's jaw tighten with each tug, his breath growing. Shallower, the morning light begins to seep timidly through the arrow-slit windows, painting thin stripes across the floor. Dust motes drift lazily through the beams, each particle a small floating story, a remnant of straw, wool, or distant hearth smoke. Once the shows are secured, the squire lifts the coif. He holds it out with both hands, as if offering a fragile relic. The knight bows his head, and the squire lowers the iron hood into place. The coif's rings press against his scalp, their chill biting at his temples, his hair cropped close. In the fashion of his time, bristles beneath the weight. The knight straightens, slowly, his neck stiff now, movements restricted. He rolls his shoulders again, each motion sending quiet ripples through the rings, like soft rain on a pond's surface. Next, the squire brings forward the padded arming cap, a simple quilted cloth hat, meant to cushion the head beneath the final helm. He places it carefully atop the coif, smoothing it down gently. The knight accepts it with a resigned sigh, his breath briefly fogging the squire's cold hands. The squire steps back and surveys his master, eyes wide with both pride and worry. In this frozen moment, they look like two figures trapped in an ancient tapestry, the armored warrior and the young page, forever poised between battle and memory. A soft knock at the door startles them both. The squire hurries to open it, revealing a servant girl carrying a small wooden tray. On it, a rough hunk of dark bread, a wedge of sharp cheese, and a wooden cup filled with weak ale. She places it silently on the small stool by the bed and retreats without a word, her thin shoes whispering across the stone. The knight approaches the tray and tears at the bread, his hands awkward inside the half gauntlets he now wears. Each bite is deliberate, mechanical. He chews slowly, his eyes unfocused, seeing beyond the chamber walls. The cheese crumbles between his fingers, leaving oily smudges on the linen sleeve poking out beneath the mail dot as he eats. The squire tidies the remaining pieces, the gauntlets, the leather belt, the sword in its scabbard, the final outer surcoat that bears the knight's crest. Each item is checked, inspected, and arranged with meticulous care. The knight sips the ale, grimacing at its sour Thames, yet he drinks deeply. The ale is not meant for pleasure, but to settle the knots in his belly. He sets the cup down and exhales a slow breath that seems to carry away a fragment of the dawn's tension. When he finishes, he turns to the squire. Their eyes meet, a silent exchange that lingers in the cool morning. The squire picks up the gauntlets and approaches, sliding them carefully over the knight's hands, tightening the straps, adjusting the fit. The knight flexes his fingers, feeling the encasing iron transform each movement into something alien and heavy. The belt follows, its leather stiff and worn from years of wear. The squire helps guide it around the knight's hips, threading it. Through the loops of the hauberk, it is cinched tight, forcing the knight to suck in a sharp breath as the final tug is made. Finally, the surcoat, a loose sleeveless garment bearing the knight's emblem, faded from sun and rain. The squire lifts it gently, lowering it over the armored shoulders. It drapes awkwardly at first, catching on a protruding ring of mail, but after some careful adjustments, it settles into place. The knight looks down at his chest, tracing the emblem with a gloved finger, a lion half-fated. its mane now just a smudge of ochre and ash dot. For a few moments, he stands still. The candle sputters beside him, its light fragile against the creeping grey of the dawn. Outside, you can hear the distant murmurs of other knights preparing, the clang of hammers on horseshoes, the low call of stable hands urging restive beasts into line. The knight turns slightly, glancing at the narrow slit of window that frames a pale sky. A crow perches there for a breath, peering inside with its sharp, glassy eyes before fluttering away in a flurry of black feathers. A shiver moves through the night despite the layers of linen and iron. The keep feels colder than the open field, a coldness that seeps not just into the bones but into the soul, a reminder of all that waits beyond the walls. He steps forward, the chainmail whispering with each motion. The squire scrambles to gather the sword, holding it out in both hands. As an offering, the knight accepts it, weighing it carefully, feeling the balance shift as he lifts it and slides it into the scabbard. The final motion, the helmet. The squire lifts it reverently, as if it were a crown rather than a vessel for sweat and echoes. The knight lowers his head slightly, and the squire slides the helmet down, adjusting the strap beneath the chin. The world narrows instantly, his breath now a loud, confined echo, his vision reduced to two thin slots of uncertain light. He breathes slowly, trying to become one with the tight, cloying darkness within. The squire steps back once more, his eyes shining with something between pride and sadness. The knight shifts his weight, flexing slightly. You can almost hear each link of mail settle into place, each small plate of iron negotiate its new angle. He nods, a slow, heavy gesture, and turns toward the door. As he steps forward, you feel the hush that falls over the chamber. You're still here, dear friend, walking silently beside the knight as he passes beneath the archway of the keep and emerges into the courtyard beyond. Breathe softly now, as if not to disturb the morning's fragile hush. The air outside is raw, slicing gently at any exposed skin, tugging at the edges of cloaks and linen hoods. The courtyard is a mosaic of grey mud and flattened straw, trampled by countless hooves and boots. A thin fog drifts among the stables and along the base of the walls, curling around the ankles of servants carrying buckets or adjusting tack. From above, a few crows observe with cool indifference, shifting from one merlin to another on the battlements. The knight stands for a moment, adjusting to the courtyard's wider space after the close stone embrace of his chamber. His armor feels heavier here, less like clothing and more like a shell, a portable tomb echoing with every step and breath at the far side. Stable hands wrestle with a restless destrier, its muscles ripple under a matted winter coat, its breath steaming into the morning gloom. The horse's eyes are wide, rolling with the instinctive knowledge of danger that no words or soft pats can fully erase. The knight walks slowly toward it. Each step makes a soft squelch in the mud. The iron-shod boots leaving deep impressions soon blurred by stray straw and drizzle. The squire trails behind, burdened with a small wooden chest, the knight's personal kit, containing spare laces, a whetstone, a tiny vial of oil for the joints of his armor, and a handful of herbs tied in a scrap of linen. Reaching the horse, the knight pauses and lays a gloved hand against its flank. The animal shivers under his touch. He murmurs softly, words not meant for anyone else to hear, phrases that have less meaning than they have rhythm and warmth. The saddle is already in place, cinched tight by a stable hand who now steps aside, wiping his brow with a frayed sleeve. The knight tests the girth, running his palm under the strap. The horse stamps impatiently, tossing its mane, the bridle jingling like small wind chimes caught in an unexpected gust. Near the horse's hooves, a shallow puddle mirrors a patch of pale sky. You see the knight's reflection there, a faceless silhouette in iron and faded cloth, leaning close to an enormous creature that stands both as his partner and his final vehicle into danger. A servant scurries forward with a battered wooden stool to help the knight mount. He places his left boot carefully, feeling the slick iron edge meet the wood, then swings his leg over. The chainmail tugs at his shoulders and hips. The helmet shifts slightly as he adjusts his balance. Once settled, he leans forward, pressing his chest against the horse's neck for a fleeting, tender moment, a small hidden prayer for steady feet and an even breath. The squire approaches, handing up the knight's shield. Its painted surface bears scrapes and faded streaks, the lion emblem now a ghost of what it once was. The knight straps it to his arm, feeling the familiar strain along his forearm. The shield is not merely a defense. It is an extension of his body, an iron door he carries between himself and the world's sharpest truths. He tests the sword next, drawing it a few inches to ensure the edge is smooth, the scabbard unwarped by damp. The blade makes a soft metallic sigh, sliding home again with an almost tender sound. The courtyard begins to shift around them. Other knights appear, each at various stages of readiness. Some still wrestling with mail shows, some testing the tightness of girths, others exchanging small, murmured comments that vanish into the damp air before they reach you. From a high window above the gatehouse, a small figure leans out, perhaps a washerwoman pausing her chores, or an elderly cook watching for the young knight she once fed. As a hungry page, her face is shadowed by the lintel, but you can sense the hush in her breath, the pause in her hands. The knight shifts in the saddle, looking up toward the window. It is a moment so brief it might be mistaken for a trick of morning mist, yet there is a gentle nod, almost imperceptible, exchanged across that empty space dot below. Squires rush about with buckets of water to scrub hooves, or small bundles of herbs to stuff beneath saddles for luck and scent. The scent of rosemary, sage, and thyme rises softly in the air, mingling with the sour smell of sweat and horse. At the gate, a small chapel stands, its doors ajar. A lone priest stands on the steps, holding a wooden cross carved so simply it might have come from a shepherd's fence. He raises a hand in a slow, open blessing, fingers spread wide against the pale sky. One by one, knights guide their horses forward, lowering their heads for a final sign of protection. The knight watches this quiet ritual with heavy eyes. You sense him weighing something inside himself, the balance of duty, fear, and the quiet tug of some other, softer calling. Beyond these walls, when it is his turn, he rides forward, pausing before the priest. The cross hovers inches from his helmet, and he bows his head slightly. The priest mutters a prayer, his voice so low it blends with the sound of clinking mail and snorting horses. A moment later, he taps the cross gently against the knight's brow, as if closing a small door inside his mind. The knight straightens and rides past, out into the lower bailey. Beyond the inner wall, villagers gather at a cautious distance, women with shawls pulled tight, old men leaning on rough sticks, a few wide-eyed children clinging to their mothers' skirts. Their expressions are a blurred tapestry of worry, awe, and reluctant reverence. A young boy breaks free from the group, darting forward before his mother can grab his sleeve. In his small hand, he carries a bundle of wildflowers, daisies, bluebells, and a single pale foxglove. He holds it out awkwardly toward the knight, arm trembling with shy urgency. The knight reins in the horse, leans carefully sideways despite the pull of his armor. With surprising gentleness, he accepts the flowers, tucking them into a strap near his saddle horn. The boy stares up, eyes round as moonlit ponds, before his mother snatches him back into the crowd. The knight nods once more, a faint echo of warmth softening the hard edges of his helmet. He shifts his gaze forward, looking beyond the villagers, beyond the muddy lane that twists down into the valley below. In the near distance, a thin trail of smoke rises from the forge, a reminder that the world continues to turn even as armor creaks and swords are raised. You can almost hear the smith's hammer, steady as a heartbeat, shaping metal for someone else's harvest knife, someone else's cooking pot, that the line of knights begins to form, a slow and clumsy procession in the half-light. Horses stamp and shuffle, men adjust straps and test weapon balances. A few exchange quiet jokes, the brittle kind that break and vanish before they can root into true laughter. A page rushes down the line with a jug of watered ale, offering sips to those who want it. The knight declines, shaking his head slightly, as though protecting the fragile edge of his focus. Instead, he reaches down to touch the bundle of flowers again, feeling the petals, almost weightless, against his gauntlet. The commander rides past, inspecting the line, nodding here and there. His helmet plume sways with each movement, a splash of red among the steel and grey. As he approaches the knight, there is a pause. Their eyes meet through narrow slits, and though no words pass, an understanding flickers between them, a shared burden older than any banner or coat of arms. The commander moves on, and the knight exhales, a long, shivering breath that fogs his visor. Somewhere behind them, the village bell tolls the hour, a slow, hesitant sound, each chime rolling across the valley like a sigh dot. As the line begins to move, the knight adjusts in the saddle again, feeling the pinch of the mail at his thighs, the dull ache blooming along his shoulders. The horse's hooves clop in an uneven rhythm, each step echoing softly inside his helmet, as though he were descending into a deep cave. They pass beneath the outer gatehouse. The arch above is studded with iron teeth, ready to drop a portcullis. In defense, today, however, it rises politely, allowing them through with an almost ceremonial reluctance. Beyond the walls, the road dips gently, curving past low hedgerows and sleepy orchards. Pale blossoms scatter on the breeze, catching in manes and stirrups, their delicate scent drifting faintly through the cold morning. The knight looks down at the petals stuck to his horse's mane, marveling briefly at their softness against the coarse hair. For a fleeting moment, his mind drifts to a spring feast long ago, when he wore a wreath of these same blossoms at a dance, the scent of spiced wine and roasted fowl heavy in the air. The memory dissolves as quickly as it surfaced, swept away by the metallic hush of moving armor dot up ahead. The mist parts slightly, revealing a low hill where the first scouts are already gathering. Banners lift uncertainly in the breeze, creaking on their poles like tired sails. A few standard bearers lean heavily against their staves, their faces slack with morning exhaustion. The knight joins the others at the base of the hill. Together, they wait for the final signal. The horse stamps the ground impatiently, snorting as small clouds drift from its nostrils. He pats its neck, feeling the tremor of its heartbeat echo against his palm. Above them, the sun finally breaches the horizon, a thin, tentative glow. It spills across the fields in pale ribbons, turning dew into fleeting jewels. The night shifts. Again, his armor catching this new light. The mail and plate momentarily shimmering as though covered in frost. The hush before the command stretches and deepens, like a held breath. Imagine now, dear listener, the hush that settles when the sun finally pushes through the shroud of mist. You're sitting quietly beside the night as he waits, his breath fogging inside his helmet, each exhale a small ghost dissolving into the soft morning light. At the base of the low hill, the ground is damp and pebbled with last night's rain. Drops cling to grass blades, rolling down to disappear into the soft earth. Crows watch from distant fence posts, heads tilting curiously, black eyes glimmering like onyx beads around him. The other knights fidget in their saddles, shifting the weight of chainmail that chews at collarbones and presses on hips. You hear the gentle creak of leather reins, the muted snort of a horse flicking its ears at a stray fly, the quiet cough of a squire trying to hide his nerves. Above them, banners stir slowly, catching hesitant gusts. The cloth, once vibrant, is now pale and frayed at the edges, each thread whispering stories of earlier rides and distant tournaments under gentler suns. The painted sigils, a lion here, a stag there, a simple tower on another blur in the drifting light, becoming half-remembered shapes in a half-awake dream. A commander raises his arm, his gauntlet catching a beam of sun. The knights lean forward almost imperceptibly, each mind tightening into a single, shared thread of intention. You can feel the shift, the collective inhale, like the first tug on a fishing line far out in still water. The arm drops. The line of knights begins its slow march forward. Your knight nudges his horse into motion, each hoof sinking softly into the damp track. He adjusts the shield strapped to his forearm, feeling the wooden grip warm beneath his fingers. The flowers, tucked beside his saddle horn, sway with each step, their petals beginning to droop under the morning sun. They move at a measured pace, not yet the thunderous charge that songs love to describe. Instead, it is a procession, a moving tapestry of iron, leather, and shivering breath. Every few moments, a horse stamps or tosses its head, sending up a mist of sweat and dew. Your knight keeps his head angled slightly downward, watching the road ahead through the narrow slit of his visor. Each jolt of the saddle echoes up his spine, reverberating in the tight curve of his neck. The chainmail shifts with a low, rhythmic hush, as though iron rain were flowing around his shoulders. To the left, a young knight adjusts the angle of his lance repeatedly, unable to settle. His squire rides alongside briefly on a pony, lips moving in a steady stream of whispered reassurances before peeling away to wait behind the lines. The young knight's breath fogs heavily, a visible pulse of fear that swells and recedes. To the right, an older warrior, his surcoat dark with years of grime and patches, hums softly inside his helmet, a thin, reedy tune from some long-forgotten fair or fireside. The sound is so faint it might be mistaken for wind weaving through a chapel window. The line continues, reaching the first crest of the hill. Beyond it, fields stretch like a great green quilt, stitched with low hedges and scattered patches of wildflowers. The far edge blurs into mist, a soft grey line where the world seems to breathe and recede like a slow tide. Below, a smattering of figures moves uncertainly, farm hands gathering livestock into wooden pens, an old shepherd guiding sheep away from the coming clamour. Children darting through orchard rows to watch from a safe distance. The knight looks toward them, his eyes catching on small details. A girl with red ribbons in her braids, an old man leaning on a bent staff, a black dog trotting anxiously behind its master. In another life, perhaps these would be neighbors, or faces glimpsed during a slow market morning over baskets of apples and bunches of thyme. As the nights descend the hill, the ground begins to level into a wide meadow. Dampness seeps up through the hooves, the soft earth yielding slightly beneath each step. The knight's horse tosses its head, dislodging a few flower petals that drift lazily down to the mud below. They halt near a copse of thin birch trees, their pale trunks shining faintly like columns of an abandoned cathedral. The knight's array, themselves in loose formation, the commander riding up and down the line, checking each man in turn. His plume trails behind him like a red wisp of smoke. A long silence settles. You hear the hush of distant leaves, the slow click of armor as each knight shifts. Someone mutters a prayer. Another clears his throat in small, apologetic gasps. The knight flexes his fingers around the sword grip, feeling the roughness of the leather wrap. He lifts it slightly, tests the balance again, then lowers it back into place. His shoulders ache, a dull, gnawing pulse that reaches from neck to fingertips. Finally, the commander stops before your knight. He leans forward slightly, their helmets almost touching. Though no words pass that you can hear, a tiny nod follows, a mutual recognition of duty, of shared edges, of the quiet spaces between heartbeats where fear lives. The commander rides on, your knight shifts in his saddle, glancing briefly at the flowers again. He feels their delicate stems brushing against the edge of his armor, a fleeting warmth in the cold sea of iron. Then comes the distant sound, at first only a tremor along the ground, as though a giant had sighed deep below. The fields. Gradually, it rises into a low murmur, the shuffle of feet, the creak of leather, the faint rattle of distant shields. The opposing force approaches, ghost-like through the morning mist. Shapes coalesce slowly, a banner here, a helmet there, a horse's mane shimmering in weak sun. They move without sound at first, each step a whisper across the meadow as they draw closer. The world sharpens into fragile clarity. Faces become visible, pale, tight-lipped, glances darting sideways to comrades, eyes wide and raw beneath visors and helms. The final pause stretches long and thin. You feel it inside you too, like the hush before a distant bell tolls. Every breath expands the silence. Every blink stretches the edges of the waiting world. Then the horn, the note slices the air, thin and sharp as a sparrow's cry. Horses surge forward, shields lift. The meadow erupts. Your knight squeezes, his knees into the horse's sides, feeling the animal leap beneath him. The jolt rattles through every joint, his teeth clack inside the helmet. The chainmail hisses with each bounce, each crash of hoof against earth. The two forces meet like slow waves colliding, not with a single crash but with rolling, overlapping crests. Horses rear and scream, men twist and swing, swords flash in. Sudden arcs, your knight lifts his shield just in time to deflect a spear thrust, the wood shuddering in his arm. He swings his sword low, slicing across an enemy's leg, feeling the vibration buzz up his elbow. A scream follows, quickly swallowed by the din dot blows rain down. Some he blocks, some scrape across the helmet or glance off the shoulder plates. Each impact steals a sliver of breath. Each parry saps another drip of strength. The world narrows to the clang of metal, the sickly sweet scent of sweat and blood, the stinging heat of breath trapped inside the iron mask. The knight ducks beneath. A mace swing thrusts upward and watches the enemy stumble backward, arms flailing before crumpling into the mud. He turns immediately, deflecting another attack. Each motion automatic and half-remembered from endless practice in torchlit yards. A sudden shove from the side almost unseats him. He tightens his thighs, leans forward, and finds his balance. Again, his horse squeals in pain or fear, impossible to tell which. He glances down, sees a shallow cut on its flank. He rubs its neck, murmuring again, "Steady, steady." Somewhere to his left, a knight tumbles from his saddle, crashing into the mud with a muffled groan. Another rides past, blade raised high before vanishing into the press of bodies and glinting spears. Above all this, banners twist and flap madly, their sigils lost to mud and spatter. The fight drags on in a grinding, exhausting rhythm. Each swing, each shove, each heavy breath becomes a small universe of pain and motion. At last, after what feels like endless loops of parry and press, a horn sounds again, lower now, ragged, as if gasping for air. The line begins to break. The enemy falters, some falling back, others turning to run, their shapes dissolving into the morning haze. Your knight feels the tension in his muscles slacken, though his limbs still shiver with leftover tremors. He draws in a deep, shaky breath. His vision blurs and sharpens again. Around him, the field is a tapestry of collapsed bodies, stray weapons, and scattered plumes. Horses pick their way through cautiously, snorting and rolling their eyes. He lifts his visor. At last, the cold air striking his sweat-soaked face like a slap. He blinks, tastes the dampness of rain and iron on his lips. Slowly, almost dreamlike, he swings a leg over and dismounts. His boots squish into the mud, the weight of his armor, threatening to drag him down. He steadies himself against the horse's side, feeling its ribs heave. The squire emerges from the thinning fog, face pale and eyes wide. He rushes forward, grasping at the knight's arm, helping him take a few careful steps away from the press. Of the fallen, together, they find a patch of grass just beyond the edge of the worst mud. The knight sits, leaning heavily against a half-buried rock. He unlatches his helmet fully and lifts it off, setting it carefully in the grass beside him. The squire kneels, fumbling for a waterskin. The knight drinks deeply, the water splashing down his chin, mingling with the mud and blood caked along his jaw. Story 3. The silent thirst of the siege. Water, wells, and waiting good evening, once again, dear friend. You've just set aside the weight of chainmail and the rumble of distant fields. Tonight, let us slip quietly into another chapter of forgotten human resilience, not under the din of swords, but behind cold. High walls where silence is both a shield and a curse. Imagine it now, an ancient stone fortress, standing solemn atop a gentle rise. Its walls are thick and chalky, worn smooth by winds and rains that have drifted across centuries. The air is heavy with an early summer haze. Flies hover lazily in the stillness, and the ground beyond the walls lies dry and cracked under the pale sun. You walk softly along the battlements, your fingers brushing along the rough, pitted stone. Below, a ragged patchwork of tent sprawls, out in an uneasy sea of cloth and smoke. Each tent hides weary soldiers, some fletching arrows, others gnawing on hard bread, some simply staring into the horizon as though they might see tomorrow hiding behind it. Inside the fortress, life has slowed into something thick and sticky, like honey left too long in a pot. You step into a narrow passageway and feel the walls close in, cool and damp even as the sun blazes outside. Along this corridor, faint echoes bounce the muted sob of a woman cradling a child, the soft chant of a priest in a darkened chapel, the hurried whisper of a guard reporting on dwindling stores. In the central courtyard, a single well stands guard. Its stone lip is polished smooth by hundreds of hands, each print a silent prayer for survival. The well's rope creaks softly as a bucket rises from the depths, water droplets sparkling momentarily before vanishing into the dust below, nearby. A group of children huddle together, their eyes wide and solemn despite their youth. One small girl clutches a chipped wooden cup. Her knuckles are white with tension as she waits her turn at the well. When her mother finally lifts the heavy bucket, the girl dips her cup inside with trembling fingers. The water that spills over her hands glitters like tiny stars before sinking into the dry earth. You might imagine that the water is cold and sweet, but after so many weeks of siege, it is lukewarm and faintly metallic. Yet to these children, it is a treasure more precious than any jewel. The girl sips slowly, eyes closing, each swallow an act of quiet worship in the shade of the wall. An old mason rests on a low bench. His hair is thin and white, his face a map of sunken lines and small scars. His fingers twist around a clay jug, half filled with water he guards like a dragon. When he drinks, he does so in the smallest sips imaginable, letting each drop linger on his tongue before it disappears down his throat. Across the courtyard, a small group of knights confers in hushed tones. Their armor is dull with dust, and one of them carries a dented helm beneath his arm. They lean close, heads bowed as though in prayer, discussing rationing, well inspections, and the possibility of digging new channels to draw water from a deeper spring. Beyond them, in the small chapel, candles flicker weakly against a rough altar. A priest kneels, his thin lips moving endlessly. In his hands he clutches a small bowl filled with water, its surface trembling with each of his words. Outside the chapel door, two elderly women sit, each cradling a clay pot on their laps. Their eyes rest on the priest, silently hoping that his prayers might coax rain from the bright, empty sky. In one corner of the fortress, a kitchen hearth lies cold. Once it rang with the laughter of cooks and the savory sense of stews and fresh bread. Now, soot clings to the walls, and a single iron pot sits abandoned, its bottom layered with a hardened crust of old porridge. A young kitchen maid sits nearby, carefully counting beans one by one, her lips silently forming numbers like a lullaby. A few paces away, an elderly gardener tends to a row of wilted herbs. He moves his hands slowly, almost reverently, pinching dry leaves and rearranging them in a small clay bowl. His movements are so precise, so gentle, that you might think he's tending a temple rather than a garden on the edge of collapse. Every morning, he pours a single ladle of water onto the roots, whispering apologies to each plant for the stingy gift. As you stand there in your mind's eye, the wind shifts. A thin wisp of smoke curls over the walls, a sign of a distant campfire in the besiegers' encampment below. You can almost hear their muted laughter and the clink of wooden mugs, a cruel echo to the silent thirst within the fortress walls. Inside, ration records are kept on a long parchment, the ink running in places from the sweat of anxious fingers. A steward hunches over the table, scratching new entries with a trembling quill. Each name he writes is a small prayer, each tally mark a quiet bell tolling somewhere deep in his mind. On the upper walkway, A young lookout leans against a battered shield, his eyes scanning the horizon with a vacant glaze. His lips are cracked, his tongue heavy behind them, but his mind drifts elsewhere, perhaps to a memory of a creek in spring, where minnows dart among pebbles and cool currents embrace bare ankles. Sometimes he closes his eyes and imagines the sound of water, the gentle chuckle over stones, the soft hush of mossy banks. He breathes slowly, as though each inhale might carry a phantom taste of that forgotten stream. As dusk begins to gather its soft grey shawl around the walls, a hush deepens even further. Families retreat into their small, dark chambers. You can hear the soft clatter of wooden cups set down beside pallets, the rustling of straw mattresses as people settle in, the faint sobs muffled under rough blankets. The well stands alone under the fading sky, a patient sentinel holding the fragile thread of life. Its dark mouth yawns upward, echoing back every drop, every secret, every small, careful blessing that drifts down to its depths. In the last light of the day, an old woman approaches the well for her evening measure. She leans heavily on a crooked cane, her shoulders hunched beneath a patchwork shawl. Her eyes hold a quiet determination, as if she has stood at this well every evening for 100 years. When she lowers her bucket, she hums a thin, wavering tune, a song her grandmother taught her in another life, when water was plentiful and each dawn brought fresh dew on the grass. The rope creaks, the bucket descends into darkness, and she waits, her song mingling with the cooling air. When the bucket returns, she peers inside and nods slowly, as though greeting an old friend. She lifts a ladle to her lips, sips once, then splashes the rest into a small clay bowl at her feet. A skinny, half-blind dog pads forward, lapping the water eagerly before curling into a tight circle beside her. The woman sits down heavily, her back against the well. She closes her eyes and tilts her head back toward the sky, where the first stars shiver into sight. You watch her breathe, each inhale long and thoughtful, each exhale a soft goodbye to the day's quiet struggles tonight. As you lie beneath your own blankets, imagine that fortress standing silent against the dark, each soul inside wrapped in a slow, echoing thirst. Hear the quiet lap of water in the well, the hush of a dog's tongue, the slow crinkle of dry leaves under an old gardener's hands. Let this slow rhythm rock you into rest. We will pause here, with the sky deepening and stars multiplying above that weary, waiting stone circle. You awaken inside the fortress at first light. The world outside remains shrouded in grey, and the air carries that thin, metallic smell of pre-dawn dampness. It's as if the entire stronghold is taking one long, quiet breath before the day begins its slow, inevitable crawl forward. The central courtyard still holds its sentinel well, cold and patient as ever. In the quietest corners of your mind, you can hear the bucket ropes swaying gently in the morning breeze, the echo of each droplet falling deep into its dark mouth. People begin to stir in the stone chambers, and low wooden lean-tos pressed against the walls. Thin mats are rolled up. Woolen cloaks are shaken out and draped over tired shoulders. The fortress wakes, not with a roar, but with a low, resigned murmur, a communal whisper that today, again, will demand patience and endurance. You follow a young woman named Jezebel as she moves toward the well. Her hair is pulled back in a rough braid, dark strands escaping here and there to tickle her sunburnt cheeks. In one hand, she carries a small pail wrapped in twine, its bottom stained with old moss. In the other, she cradles a chipped ceramic bowl. Jezebel's path takes her past the kitchen entrance, where a cook stands with arms folded. He watches a young boy stir a pot of thin gruel over a weak flame. The cook's eyes look far away, perhaps to a feast table long forgotten, or a childhood morning filled with warm bread and sweet butter. She nods slightly to him, and he nods back without words. Their eyes share a quiet understanding, the silent promise to make this day bearable, even in its smallest moments. As Jezebel reaches the well, she waits behind two elderly men hunched over like ancient willows. They shuffle forward slowly, each clutching a flask so worn its original shape is barely recognizable. One of them coughs quietly, a dry rasp that echoes briefly off the courtyard stones, while waiting. Jezebel looks up at the sky, a pale canvas streaked with early hints of gold. There are no clouds today, no soft promise of rain. She squints and closes her eyes for a moment, as if trying to remember the smell of wet fields after a spring storm. When her turn comes, she lowers her pail carefully, listening to the rope creak and strain under the weight of the empty bucket. The sound is a lullaby for the fortress now, as familiar as a mother's hum to a restless child. The bucket disappears into the dark, swallowing light and sound alike. After a long pause, she feels the change in tension. The bucket has touched the water's surface far below. She draws it back up, her arms straining gently, her breath coming in steady. Practiced puffs dot at the edge of the well. An older woman sits with her legs folded beneath her. Her hands are busy weaving a small basket out of brittle reeds gathered from the fortress moat months ago. She glances up at Jezebel and smiles faintly, her eyes crinkling into soft lines of shared hardship, still strong today. The woman asks, her voice almost lost in the morning hush. Jezebel nods, setting the pail beside her feet. For today, yes, she replies. The woman chuckles quietly and returns to her weaving. Each reed slides and bends with a dry whisper, the rhythm echoing the fortress's slow heartbeat. Nearby, a blacksmith wipes soot from his brow with the back of his arm. His forge has gone, cold weeks ago, but he still tends to small repairs. A buckled pot handle here, a cracked blade there. Today he hammers softly at a bent ladle, each tap measured, as though he fears waking ghosts in the courtyard beyond him. Two small children chase each other in a slow, aimless game. Their laughter sounds brittle, breaking easily against the stone walls. Their mother, sewing a torn sleeve, glances up with a tired smile and gently calls them back to her side in the chapel. The priest stands at the altar, tracing the rim of a shallow wooden bowl filled with water. He holds the bowl aloft in a small, shaking ceremony each morning, hoping for mercy, rain, or perhaps simply the comfort of ritual. Candles flicker weakly beside him, wax pooling like slow, silent tears. A small choir of voices rises behind him, a few old women and 2 or 3 gaunt-faced boys. Their chant moves like a slow tide, rising and falling with each line, then fading into the thick hush beyond the chapel door. You follow Jezebel back to her family's small chamber. The pail in her hands seems heavier with each step, the water inside sloshing softly, echoing like distant footfalls in an empty hall. She enters a narrow doorway framed by tattered cloth, stepping into a room with rough stone walls and a low timber ceiling. Inside, her father rests on a straw pallet, his face pale and drawn. His eyes flicker open when he hears her, a faint spark of warmth passing across them. Beside him, her younger brother fidgets under a threadbare blanket, one thin arm peeking out like a wilted branch. Jezebel sets the pail down gently. She dips a small ladle and offers it first to her father, who drinks with closed eyes, savoring each drop as if it were a secret gift. She then moves to her brother, tipping the ladle slowly so not a single precious drop spills. Afterward, she pours a small measure into the ceramic bowl for herself. She sips with careful reverence, feeling the tepid water slide down her throat and settle like a quiet blessing in her belly. Outside their door, the fortress hums in its slow, painful routine. A group of guards assembles near the inner gate, each checking their battered shields and spears. Their commander, an older man with a scar slicing across his cheek, counts heads and assigns watch rotations in a hoarse whisper. Farther down the corridor, a mother braids her daughter's hair. The girl's head rests heavily against her mother's knee, her eyelids drooping as her mother's fingers weave a slow, careful pattern. Stray strands fall over her cheeks, and every so often the mother tucks them behind the girl's ear with a tenderness that feels almost too delicate for such a stark place. Near the outer wall, a few archers stand on the battlements, squinting into the morning light. Their quivers look thin, arrows rationed like sips of water. One archer fidgets with the feathers on a single arrow, smoothing them again and again, as though this small ritual might extend the life of the shaft, or grant him some extra fortune when the next attack comes. You might sense it, too, that low undercurrent of tension winding through each step, each whisper, each gentle sigh. Every heartbeat inside these walls echoes with thirst for water, for safety, for the return of ordinary mornings unmarked by siege and hunger. As noon approaches, the sun leans heavy overhead, casting stark shadows across the courtyard. The stones underfoot radiate heat, though it offers no comfort. Instead, it draws sweat from every brow, drying lips and deepening the silent ache that curls around every thought. A group of young boys gathers near the well to fetch a communal ration for the kitchens. They move awkwardly, each step heavy with the knowledge of responsibility too large for their small shoulders. They laugh in short, nervous bursts, not from joy, but as a fragile shield against the seriousness they must carry. The well master, a stooped old man with shoulders like sagging sacks, oversees them, counting each bucket as it rises. His eyes dart from face to face, watchful and weary, each wrinkle etched with the memory of former sieges, former starvations. At the end of the line, a boy named Laurent waits, his hands clutching a small wooden dipper. When it's his turn, he lowers the bucket with trembling arms. As he draws it back up, he stares into the water as though it might contain some hidden message from a gentler world. After filling his dipper, Laurent carries it away with the careful grace of a monk bearing sacred relics. Each drop is an offering, each step a prayer. In the kitchens, the cook receives the water with a solemn nod. He tips it into a large soup pot where a handful of barley grains wait to become thin porridge. The cook stirs slowly, each swirl a slow circle echoing in the depths of the pot. Back in Jezebel's chamber, her father dozes lightly, breath thin and raspy. She sits at his side, weaving small braids from leftover bits of string, a quiet ritual to keep her hands busy and her mind from slipping into deeper worries. She glances out through a narrow slit window, watching the walls shimmer under the sun, imagining the enemy's distant fires beyond the rise. The flicker of those fires at night sometimes looks like stars, each one a tiny flame whispering that tomorrow is still far away. In the late afternoon, a slow procession forms at the chapel. The priest emerges holding a small bowl of water, followed by a scattering of townsfolk. They move in single file, heads bowed, each person touching the rim of the bowl briefly as they pass. It is less about quenching thirst than affirming hope that thin, unwavering belief that each dawn might yet bring relief near the end of the line. Jezebel joins, her fingers grazing the bowl's edge. She feels the coolness for just a moment, enough to awaken a flicker of memory. Green fields after rain, her mother's hands cupped under a spring spout, the smell of wet earth rising like a hymn. As the sun leans westward, shadows stretch across the courtyard like long, weary sighs. The fortress walls glow dimly, painted by the final light. Guards trade shifts in silence, each man's steps echoing in the stone passageways like distant drumbeats. Jezebel returns to her chamber and finds her brother asleep, his lips slightly parted. Her father stirs and opens his eyes, meeting hers in a wordless exchange. She kneels beside him, resting her forehead against his hand. His fingers curl weakly around hers, a fragile bridge across the hush. As twilight drapes itself over the fortress, the wind picks up, stirring scraps of cloth and dry leaves. The night has wrapped its quiet shawl around the fortress. You can almost feel it pressing gently on your shoulders as you walk once more among these moon-silvered stones. The air is cool now, almost forgiving, and a faint scent of distant fires drifts up from the besiegers' camp beyond the walls. Inside the fortress, the world seems to hold its breath. Each creak of a wooden door, each shifting straw mattress, each low sigh echoes through the corridors like a ripple across a still pond. Jezebel sits beside her father and brother, her fingers moving softly over the small braids of string she had begun earlier. She pauses every so often to listen, for what, she isn't sure. Perhaps for a drop of rain on the stones outside, or a distant horn calling an unexpected truce. But the only sounds are the slow, uneven breaths of her family and the gentle hush of her own heart. In another corner of the fortress, the cook moves quietly among the pots. Tonight's meal has long been served. Thin barley porridge, more water than grain, yet still a kind of blessing. Now he wipes each pot carefully, his rag moving in steady circles, as if polishing small pieces of moonlight caught in the iron. When he finishes, he sits on a low stool, turning an empty ladle over and over in his hand. He closes his eyes and lets the metal rest against his forehead, murmuring a slow, private prayer. You cannot hear the words, but they roll out of him like the soft hush of wind through dry reeds dot above. On the battlements, the archers hold their silent vigil. Their silhouettes lean against the crenellations, heads bowed. One young archer hums to himself, a thin, wandering melody that flickers and fades like candlelight. Another archer rests his head against the stone, eyes closed, dreaming of rivers and deep forest pools. The commander with the scar walks the line softly. He pauses by each man, resting a gloved hand on a shoulder or offering a short nod. His eyes scan the darkness beyond the walls, but they carry no fire tonight, only the long, quiet weight of responsibility that has seeped into his bones. Far below, the courtyard glimmers under the moon, the well at its center like an old oracle. Its surface reflects the night sky, trembling slightly when the rope swings or a breeze brushes past. Sometimes a leaf or a stray feather drifts down, spinning slowly before vanishing into the dark. A young squire, hardly more than a boy, kneels beside the well, his head bowed. His hands are clasped tightly around a small wooden cross, his lips moving in a rapid, whispered litany. Every so often, he glances into the depths of the well, as though it might offer an answer, a sign, a tiny miracle. On the inner steps leading up from the courtyard, an old mason sits wrapped in a patched cloak. His gnarled fingers move over small piece of limestone, carving delicate lines that catch the moonlight like tiny veins. He works slowly, as though each scrape of his knife against the stone is a heartbeat, a small defiance against the hunger and the thirst pressing on every wall. Inside a chamber near the east wall, an elderly woman tends to a row of dry herbs strung from a beam. She pinches a brittle sprig of rosemary, bringing it to her nose and closing her eyes. In her mind, she is far away, perhaps in a summer garden, heavy with bees, her hands stained with soil and sap. She smiles faintly, and a single tear slides down her cheek, vanishing into the folds of her sleeve. Jezebel rises quietly in her family's chamber, stepping into the corridor with her pail. The floor is cool beneath her bare feet. She moves slowly, each step deliberate and silent. The corridor is lined with old rushes, dry and fragrant, laid there to keep the chill from seeping too deeply into the stone. She passes by the chapel, pausing to glance inside. The priest sleeps, curled near the altar, a thin blanket draped over his shoulders. The bowl of water remains on the altar, moonlight glimmering on its surface. A single candle still burns beside it, its flame dancing in small arcs as if bowing to an unseen rhythm. Outside, the well stands waiting, its rope hanging slack, the bucket resting on the lip. Jezebel lowers the pail again, listening to the rope's low creak, the small splash far below. When she hauls it up, she cradles the water carefully, as though holding a small bird. She sits beside the well for a moment, placing the pail at her feet. She tilts her head back, tracing the stars with her gaze, imagining them as tiny wells in the sky, each holding worlds of cool, untouched water. She wonders if the stars could feel thirst, and if so, how they might quench it with moonlight, perhaps, or with the hush of a midnight breeze. Her thoughts drift to the world beyond the walls, the rivers that still run somewhere, the wells in quiet village squares, the lakes where fishermen sing to the dawn. She imagines dipping her hands into a clear, wide stream, water swirling past her wrists, lifting minnows in small shimmering clouds. When she stands again, she carries the pail slowly back to her chamber. She passes the mason on the stairs, nodding gently. He nods back without words, and they share that small, tender exchange, two souls recognizing each other's quiet labors. In the chamber, her father stirs as she enters, his eyes open, clouded, and tired, but he smiles faintly when he sees her. She helps him sit up, sliding a cushion behind his back, then lifts the ladle to his lips. He drinks slowly, savoring each sip with closed eyes, as though tasting sunlight itself. Afterward, she offers some to her brother, who holds the ladle with both hands, trembling slightly but smiling in his sleep-heavy haze. Finally, she drinks the last measure, feeling the water flow through her like a soft blessing, a hush within her heart. They rest together in silence, the three of them leaning against each other. Outside, the fortress hums with its moonlit chorus, the shuffle of guards' boots, the occasional soft clang of a loosened chain, the low murmur of a half-forgotten hymn drifting from the chapel. Near midnight, the fortress gates tremble slightly, under a distant breeze. Somewhere beyond the walls, a dog barks, a short, echoing sound that fades quickly. The besiegers' fires flicker on the distant hills, like fallen stars flickering on a cold shore. The commander continues his rounds, stopping to exchange brief glances with each watchman. He gazes out into the darkness, his breath coiling in the cool air. You can almost hear the weight of every decision pressing against his ribs. Each choice, another stone in the walls he holds together with sheer will. At the well, the young squire returns, kneeling once more. This time he dips his fingers into the water, lifting a few drops to his lips. He lets them rest on his tongue before swallowing, closing his eyes tightly, as if holding a prayer there before it dissolves. Hours drift onward like slow, patient clouds. Each soul in the fortress curls deeper into sleep or watchfulness. A mother soothes her baby with a soft tune, each note floating like a feather. A father whispers a story to a frightened son, his voice a low murmur weaving through the shadows. Somewhere, in the stables, a horse shifts and snorts, the sound muffled by straw and the soft shuffle of mice moving in their secret corridors. The animals breathe together, their warm bodies a small island of comfort in the fortress's sea of stone. Before dawn, Jezebel rises once more. She looks out through the narrow window slit, the sky just beginning to pale like a breath held at the edge of release. She steps outside, this time without her pail. She only stands, hands resting on the cold stone wall, watching the first hints of gold creep into the horizon dot below. The courtyard lies empty, the well alone in the dim glow. A faint mist coils around its base, and for a moment, it almost looks like it's exhaling, the fortress's ancient spirit rising to meet the new day. Jezebel closes her eyes and imagines rain falling on the fortress roofs, sliding down walls, in silver ribbons, filling barrels and jars, washing the dust from every face. She imagines laughter, the sound of feet splashing through puddles, the smell of fresh bread baking in warm ovens once again. As the first rays of sun pierce the mist, she feels a small warmth bloom on her face. She opens her eyes, lets out a slow, steady breath, and returns inside. Her father is awake, smiling faintly, his thin hand reaching for hers. Her brother stretches beside him, murmuring about dreams of green fields and wide, clear rivers. They share the morning in silence, eyes meeting in small glances that hold more comfort than any words could carry. And beyond those walls, life stirs too. The besiegers light their fires, stir their pots, and prepare their own daily struggle. The world, in all its harshness and gentle surprises, breathes on. Tonight, as you drift beneath your own covers, let this image cradle you, a fortress waking slowly, the soft glimmer of dawn touching stone and water alike, a daughter's quiet devotion and the shared hush of souls bound together by thirst, hope, and an unbreakable human softness in this slow, eternal moment. There is no rush, only the breath, the small sip of water, the hush of dawn. Rest well, friend, sleep deeply. Let's now wander into a different time, a different place. Story 4. The Candle and the Quill. Monastic scribes and the quiet breath of ink. Good evening once more, friend. You've left behind the fortress walls and the hush of the well's rope. Tonight, you step into the cloistered corridors of a medieval monastery, a place where the world was held, not in swords or shields, but in strokes of ink and the soft glow of candles. Picture it now, a small stone monastery nestled in a fold of green hills, wrapped in early morning mists that drift like wandering spirits. A thin stream curls past the walls, its soft murmuring the only voice to greet the dawn. The monastery rises gently from the earth, its roof dark with age and rain. Moss hugs the stone like a patient companion, and ivy clings to windowsills, tiny leaves trembling with each passing breeze. As you pass through the low wooden gate, the air shifts, the scent of damp parchment, beeswax candles, and crushed herbs, weaves around you like an old hymn. Each step echoes softly against the flagstones. You feel the hush settle into your bones, inviting you to move slowly, to breathe in the thick, timeless silence. Inside, long, narrow halls lead to small chambers, lit by narrow slits in the walls. In the scriptorium, the heart of this quiet world, rows of simple desks stand like watchful sentinels. Each desk holds a single quill, a pot of ink as dark as a moonless night, and stacks of parchment sheets waiting to capture centuries in curling lines dot at one desk. Brother Thomas sits, his thin shoulders hunched beneath a heavy woolen robe. His fingers are ink-stained, and small blotches mark the sleeves where he has wiped them absent-mindedly over the years. In front of him lies a manuscript, half filled with delicate Latin script. Each letter a small prayer, each margin crowded with tiny drawings of twisting vines and shy animals, peeking from between leaves. Thomas dips his quill into the ink pot, with a slow, reverent motion. Each dip is a pause, a breath, a moment to steady the mind before the next delicate curve. As he begins a new line, his lips move silently, reciting each word as if it were a soft incantation meant to soothe the soul as much as to record thought. Near him, Brother Alaric works on an illuminated initial, the large, decorative letters that begin important passages. His tools are spread carefully across the table, ground pigments mixed with egg yolk and honey, tiny brushes no thicker than a straw of hay, and thin sheets of gold leaf that tremble with each exhale. Alaric's eyes narrow as he applies a thin, blue swirl, his hand so steady it almost seems sculpted from wax. A single tremor might mean an entire day's work lost, so each movement is guided by the same calm patience that shapes a slow prayer. Behind them, the walls are lined with wooden shelves cradling finished manuscripts. Their spines lean together, like old friends whispering secrets. Some are bound in cracked leather, edges darkened by centuries of careful fingers. Others wear simple linen covers, stitched together with humble devotion. From the high window, a slant of morning light falls across the room, catching tiny motes of dust drifting like a constellation in slow motion. The sun will move slowly across the wall all day, marking time for the scribes in its gentle passage, a quiet companion to their labor. Outside, the monastery garden begins to stir. A brother moves slowly among rows of sage, rosemary, and lavender, his sandals scuffing the moist earth. His hands cradle each plant, fingers tracing leaves and stems as though reading a secret language hidden in the veins. A few paces away, another brother carries a wooden bucket to the well, the water sloshing in quiet waves against its sides. Each step is a measured echo, each breath a small offering to the stillness around him. In the kitchen, the morning's thin porridge simmers in an iron pot over a low fire. The cook, a round-faced man with gentle eyes, stirs slowly with a carved wooden spoon. Every so often, he pauses to look out the window, where sparrows gather on the stones to peck at scattered crumbs. The scriptorium remains the true heart. Every breath, every scrape of quill against parchment, every careful turning of a page creates a soft music that wraps the room in a kind of sacred warmth. Brother Thomas shifts slightly, flexing his cramped fingers before returning to his line. He copies a passage from an ancient psalter, each letter forming a bridge across centuries. Brother Alaric gently lifts a thin gold leaf with a delicate brush, placing it precisely along the edge of a curling vine motif. He holds his breath as He presses it down, the gold catching the light like a tiny sunrise trapped in the manuscript's corner. Beyond the scriptorium's heavy oak door, a narrow corridor runs along the south wall. Here, Brother Gregor tends to the ink supplies. In small clay pots, he mixes gall ink from oak galls, iron salts, and vinegar, each swirl of his spoon like a low chant. He checks the consistency by drawing thin lines on scraps of parchment, each line a small pilgrimage toward perfection. Brother Gregor's beard is dusted with fine powder from crushed minerals. When he smiles, his teeth flash like small white stones at the bottom of a clear brook. His workbench is covered with jars labeled in careful, flowing script: verdigris, ochre, vermilion, each a hidden promise of colors waiting to bloom across future pages. In the small chapel, a single candle flickers on the altar. A monk kneels before it, his forehead resting against the cold stone floor. His whispered prayers drift upward like smoke, curling around the arches and slipping into the shadows. A bell sounds softly in the courtyard, a low, rounded note that rolls through the monastery like a warm hand, smoothing wrinkled linen. The brothers pause, heads bowing in unison. A moment later, each returns to his task, the world resuming its slow, steady breath. Outside, a few visitors approach the gates. A young novice from a nearby abbey bearing a letter, an old woman with a basket of herbs to trade for a small manuscript copy of a saint's prayer, a traveller requesting shelter and a warm bowl of broth. The gatekeeper greets them with a gentle nod, his face calm and open, as though he's been expecting them all along. Inside the scriptorium, the brothers continue their work through the shifting light of the day. They break only for short meals and moments of prayer. When hunger tugs at them, they eat slowly, savoring each spoonful of broth as if tasting a hidden joy in every mouthful. By mid-afternoon, the air grows thick and drowsy. A few brothers nod briefly at their desks, heads jerking before they resume. Brother Thomas pauses to massage his neck, rolling his head gently as though trying to coax out a soft hymn trapped in his bones. Brother Alaric carefully covers his pigments and brushes, stepping outside for a brief walk among the garden paths. He breathes in the scent of lavender, the warm sweetness of thyme, the sharp green of rosemary. Bees drift lazily from bloom to bloom, their hum weaving a slow lullaby that hangs in the air. In a small side room, Brother Gregor checks the ink, stores again, muttering softly to himself as he stirs each pot. He tests each ink on scraps of parchment hung from pegs, watching the lines darken and settle. His fingers move like a potter's at the wheel, each swirl guided by a deep, patient rhythm. As the sun begins its slow descent, a soft golden glow fills the scriptorium. Dust motes dance in the light, and the pages of the manuscripts glow softly, their letters shimmering like tiny lanterns. The brothers lean closer to their work, trying to catch every last minute of natural light before the candles are lit at the evening bell. Each brother carefully sets down his tools. The quills rest gently in small carved holders. The ink pots are covered with simple wooden lids. Brother Thomas closes his manuscript with a tender motion, as though tucking a child into bed. Brother Alaric covers his unfinished illumination with a cloth, guarding it from stray dust and wandering moths. They gather in the chapel for Conclin, the final prayer of the day. Their voices rise together in slow, flowing chants that roll along the stone arches and fade into the twilight beyond the high windows. After prayers, they move silently to their narrow cells. Each cell is a small world, a straw mattress, a wooden cross on the wall, a small shelf for a candle, and perhaps a single book. As they settle under woolen blankets, the echoes of the day's quiet labors weave themselves into the hush of night in his cell. Brother Thomas lies awake for a while, replaying the lines of his manuscript in his mind. He traces each letter in the dark, feeling the slow, deliberate curves in the space above his blanket. Finally, he closes his eyes and breathes deeply, as though inhaling the whole monastery, its mossy walls, its garden scent, the soft hush of turning pages. Brother Alaric drifts to sleep with visions of gold leaf catching moonlight, the tiny swirls and vines curling like living things in his dreams. Brother Gregor dreams of rivers of ink flowing from his hands and transforming into illuminated letters that march quietly across fields of parchment under a starlit sky. And so the monastery rests, a small island of calm wrapped in candle glow and ink's silent breath. Outside, the moon keeps watch, sliding softly across the heavens, listening to the monk's slow, steady dreams. Tonight, as you rest, imagine yourself in that monastery, the gentle scrape of a quill in the dark, the sweet scent of lavender drifting. In through a narrow window, the soft murmur of prayers echoing beneath the beams. Let it soothe you like a warm blanket, each breath another slow turning of an ancient page. Dawn returns to the monastery in a hush of pale gold, like a timid guest slipping through a half-open door. The sky brightens slowly above the mossy roof tiles, the first rays touching the chapel cross, then sliding gently over the gardens. Low walls. You can almost hear it breathing, that slow, cautious light easing its way across the damp earth. Inside the scriptorium, the day begins before the sun has fully risen. A thin bell note echoes down the halls, drawing the brothers from their straw beds. You hear shuffling sandals, the creak of stiff joints, the low whisper of morning prayers drifting through narrow stone passageways. Brother Thomas is among the first to arrive at his desk. He pauses at the threshold of the scriptorium, pressing his ink-stained fingers to his forehead and chest in a small, private blessing. Then he steps forward, as though crossing into a sanctuary more intimate than the chapel itself. His quill, cleaned and sharpened the night before, rests exactly where he left it. Beside it, the manuscript lies open to a half-finished page. The letters stand like small black trees on a pale field, each branch a delicate balance of breath and ink. Brother Thomas lifts the quill slowly, turning it in his fingers as if greeting an old friend. He dips it into the ink pot, pausing just long enough to feel the weight of that moment, the potential waiting in each droplet, the echo of centuries held in a single stroke. His first line of the day emerges cautiously, each letter shaped by the faint tremble of early morning hands. With every curve and dot, he exhales softly, steadying his mind against the echoes of hunger and the ache in his knuckles. Across the room, Brother Alaric steps into the morning light streaming through a high window. Today he continues the intricate illumination on a new chapter, an image of a vine twining around a saint's initial, tiny birds peeking out from hidden leaves. He dips his fine brush into blue pigment, tapping off the excess so lightly it barely whispers against the palette. Brother Alaric's hand hovers over the parchment, as if listening for some quiet instruction. When he moves, the brush tip glides like a moth's wing, leaving a trail of blue that curls and loops in slow, hypnotic spirals. Outside, the monastery garden awakens. Brother Matthew, the gardener, kneels among rows of cabbage and onions. His fingers sift through the dark soil, pulling small weeds and crumbling clumps of dirt. He hums a soft tune, a half-forgotten hymn he learned as a novice, his voice drifting among the lavender and rosemary dot near the wall to younger brothers. Repair the wooden fence that shields the herbs from wandering deer. Their hands move in a steady rhythm. Hammer, pause, adjust, hammer again. Every so often, they lean against the fence to stretch, exchanging shy smiles and murmured jokes that dissolve quickly into the morning mist. In the kitchen, the cook stirs a pot of barley porridge, the wooden spoon making wide, slow circles. The smell of warm grain mingles with the sharp scent of fresh herbs cut earlier by Brother Matthew. A thin curl of steam rises, swirling in the draught that slips beneath the heavy door. After a time, a bell rings softly again, signaling the first break for prayer. Brother Thomas carefully sets his quill down, wiping the tip on a piece of linen. He closes his manuscript gently, as if tucking it beneath a blanket. Brother Alaric covers his pigments and brushes with a cloth, his fingers lingering briefly on the bright colours before stepping away. In a neat line, the brothers file into the chapel, their robes brushing softly against the stone floor. The chapel's small windows catch the rising sun, pouring ribbons of gold across the altar. A single candle burns steadily beside a simple wooden cross. Their chants rise slowly, weaving through the arches, pooling in the corners like warm water. After prayers, they return to the scriptorium. Brother Gregor, the ink maker, enters carrying a fresh pot of gall ink. His robes bear tiny smudges of colour, red across one sleeve, green near his cuff, a faint yellow dab near his collar. He sets the pot down with careful hands, inspecting each quill along the way. He runs a fingertip along a split nib, murmuring to himself before trimming it with a small knife. Brother Thomas watches quietly, his fingers curled around the edge of his desk, as though holding back a question or perhaps a blessing. Brother Gregor smiles softly and nods before moving on, checking pigment bowls, stirring mixtures with slow, thoughtful turns. His presence in the scriptorium is like a hush layered atop the silence already living there. Hours slip by in slow loops of breath and ink. The only sounds are the quiet scrape of quills, the soft rustle of robes, the occasional sigh as a brother stretches stiff fingers. Outside, a breeze moves through the garden, carrying the scent of crushed time into the scriptorium's open windows. Brother Alaric pauses in his work to look outside, his eyes following the trembling leaves. He closes them for a moment, imagining himself walking barefoot among the garden rows, dew wetting his toes, bees humming near his ears. He opens his eyes with a gentle exhale and bends once more over his parchment. In the small refectory, the midday meal is served in silence. A thin broth, rough bread, and a few wilted greens fill each bowl. The brothers eat slowly, eyes lowered. Now and then, a spoon clinks softly against a bowl's rim. A small note in the day's quiet song. After eating, Brother Thomas returns to his manuscript. He places a thin piece of parchment beneath his wrist to keep from smudging the ink. Each new line is a bridge, a tender archway from one moment to the next. Each letter a footprint on an endless road. Brother Alaric moves between brush and quill, adding fine gold lines that catch the afternoon light. He leans close to the parchment, his breath stirring the gold leaf before he presses it carefully into place. Each addition is a heartbeat, a promise that beauty might endure even in the smallest spaces. Brother Gregor walks softly among them, delivering new quills and checking ink levels. Sometimes he pauses to share a quiet word, a gentle smile that rests like a hand on a tired shoulder. His voice carries the warmth of a hearth on a winter morning, each syllable falling like soft ash dot as the sun dips lower. Shadows stretch across the scriptorium floor, long fingers that move slowly up the walls. The air grows cooler, carrying the scent of evening fires beginning in distant hearths beyond the monastery walls. Outside, Brother Matthew gathers a few herbs for supper. He presses a sprig of mint to his nose, closing his eyes as he breathes. In its sharp sweetness, he moves carefully, as if each leaf were a verse in a fragile poem. A distant church bell echoes over the hills, the sound tumbling down into the garden like a soft stone into deep water. Brother Matthew looks up briefly, his eyes reflecting the fading light, then returns to his quiet harvest. In the scriptorium, Brother Thomas finishes a page. He lifts it carefully, tilting it to examine the letters in the slanting light. He sets it aside to dry, covering it lightly with a scrap of linen. He begins a new page, each line a new horizon to cross. Brother Alaric finishes the last of the gold detailing for the day. He sits back, rubbing the bridge of his nose with ink-streaked fingers. He stands, stretching his arms toward the ceiling. Beams, his back popping softly in the hush. Brother Gregor begins to tidy his pigments and ink pots, humming a slow, winding melody under his breath. It sounds like a river moving through reeds, a sound that might follow you into dreams. The evening bell calls them once again to prayer. One by one they leave their tools and gather in the chapel. The final light of the day slides across the stone floor, catching the gentle sway of their robes as they file in. Their chants tonight are soft and low, a warm blanket drawn over the monastery's bones. As the last note fades, they move to supper, a simple meal taken in silence, with heads bowed and eyes half closed. Later, in their cells, the brothers settle into beds that creak softly under their weight. Brother Thomas holds a scrap of parchment. By candlelight, reviewing a small passage he plans to copy tomorrow. He folds it carefully and tucks it beneath his pillow, a hidden seed for the morning's first thoughts. Brother Alaric lies on his back, staring at the ceiling. He traces invisible patterns in the air above him, following the curves of imagined vines and small birds. His breathing deepens, each exhale a slow descent into sleep. Brother Gregor lies, listening to the last embers of the day fade into the corridor's hush. He smiles, the day's quiet labors unfolding gently behind his eyelids like a slow-turning page. Outside, the moon rises, spilling its silver across the garden and the stone paths. The monastery rests, a small island of stillness wrapped in candlelight and ink's quiet breath. As you drift beneath your own blankets tonight, imagine that hush settling into your bones. Feel the weight of the quill in your hand, the warmth of a candle flickering beside you, the scent of ink and crushed mint. Let it carry you softly into the deep, quiet spaces of sleep. Night falls upon the monastery like a velvet cloak, soft and heavy. The last echo of the evening bell drifts into the dark, and the brothers retreat one by one to their narrow cells. Yet in the scriptorium, a quiet glow remains. A single candle flickers at Brother Thomas's desk, casting a small golden island in a sea of shadows. He sits hunched forward, shoulders rounding over his manuscript. The pages before him shimmer faintly under the flame's dance, each line a small thread tying him to the world beyond the stone walls. His breath is steady, and the quill moves as though guided by the heartbeat of the night itself. Outside, the wind combs through the garden, rustling the rosemary and thyme, tapping lightly on the window shutters. The moon peers down, patient and pale, its light catching on dewdrops that have begun to gather on the ivy leaves. Brother Thomas dips his quill carefully, drawing it out with a slow, ritualistic movement. A droplet of ink trembles on the nib, waiting. His fingers guide it to the parchment, and it lands softly, blooming into the fibers like a seed into soil. Tonight, he copies a passage about patience, a meditation on stillness and suffering. His lips move silently, shaping each Latin word as his hand glides over the page. Each letter is an offering, each curve a tiny prayer carried out into the hush beyond the walls. Meanwhile, Brother Alaric stands in his small cell, studying a sheet, a vellum tacked to the wall. By candlelight, he sketches quick, pale lines, new designs for tomorrow's illuminations. A griffin curls into a vine, a fish weaves among leaves, a small angel peeks shyly from a bud of rose. His mind drifts back to the garden he visited. Earlier that day, the cool touch of mint on his fingertips, the gentle murmur of bees weaving around his ankles. He closes his eyes, breathing in the phantom scents, and imagines a bright blue pigment blooming like rosemary blossoms across the page. Down the hall, Brother Gregor tends his ink pots even now. He stirs the gall ink slowly, listening to the swirl as if it tells him secrets. A candle stub flickers beside him, light jumping over the dark pools of liquid. He carefully tests the ink on a scrap, watching the line darken and spread like a quiet stream winding through winter fields. When he is satisfied, he covers each pot with a small linen square and ties it with twine. He wipes his hands on a cloth, leaving faint greyish smudges, small ghosts of his labour that he carries back to his cell. Farther down the corridor, a young novice struggles to sleep. He lies curled on his straw mattress, fingers twisting in his blanket. In his mind, the day's chants echo and overlap with the scrape of quills and the scent of fresh ink. He imagines the letters floating above him, drifting like feathers, whispering prayers he cannot quite understand. He rises and pads softly to the scriptorium door. Peeking inside, he sees Brother Thomas hunched over his manuscript. For a moment, he watches the old scribe's hand moving steadily, the quill tip shimmering slightly each time it catches the candle's light. A soft reverence settles into the novice's bones, a hush so deep he almost forgets to breathe. He retreats back to his cell, the image of that glowing room tucked gently beneath his ribs. He lies down again, the hush filling him, and finally slips into sleep. Hours pass like drifting clouds. The scriptorium grows colder as the candle burns lower, its flame now a small, delicate petal trembling against the dark. Brother Thomas lifts his quill one last time tonight. He finishes a final line, setting down a word that means quietude or stillness. He sits back, eyes soft and unfocused. His hand rests on the parchment as if reluctant to leave. After a long breath, he carefully cleans his quill, lays it in its wooden groove, and closes the manuscript. He slides a thin strip of vellum between the pages to mark his place, a promise to return with the dawn. He rises slowly, joints creaking like old wood in the wind. He carries the candle in his left hand, shielding the flame with his palm as he walks the narrow corridor. The shadows bend and sway around him, slipping up the walls and pooling at his feet in his cell. He sets the candle on the small shelf beside his straw mattress. He kneels on the cold floor, murmuring a final prayer. His voice is soft and rough, each word dissolving into the dark like breath on glass. When he lies down, he closes his eyes and imagines the day's letters unspooling in the dark behind his. Lids curling and weaving until they dissolve into a vast ink-black sea. At the same time, Brother Alaric rolls up his sketches and ties them with twine. He places them beside his pillow, a small comfort waiting for him when the morning light first cracks the eastern window. He lies back, staring at the ceiling, fingers tracing invisible vines in the air. Each curve soothes him, and slowly he drifts away into a garden of dreams. Brother Gregor, in his cell, listens to the wind moving through the courtyard. In his mind, the ink swirls on, an endless river he has tended all his life. He imagines, dipping a brush into the moonlight, painting soft arcs across the sky. A faint smile tugs at his lips as he drifts into slumber. Outside, the garden breathes quietly. Dew gathers along the edges of each mint leaf, sliding down to the earth below. A small snail inches across a stone, leaving a thin silver trail that gleams in the moonlight. Bats flit through the shadows, their wings stitching the night together with invisible thread. Beyond the walls, a distant village settles into its own dreams. A mother hushes her child beside a dying fire. A shepherd snores beneath a patchwork blanket. A stray dog curls beneath a wooden cart. The world exhales, a great hush spreading like a blanket over field and forest alike. In the monastery, every cell becomes a small universe, a chamber filled with breath and silent prayers. The scriptorium rests now, empty and still. The quills sleep in their grooves, ink pots sealed like tiny tombs. The unfinished manuscripts lie waiting, their letters shimmering faintly beneath the moonlight that slips through the high windows. You might imagine yourself now in that scriptorium, the smell of wax and old parchment, the cool draft brushing. Your cheek, the whisper of your own slow breath mingling with the hush. You reach for a quill, its weight perfectly balanced, and touch it to the page. The ink blooms outward, each letter a small star in a dark sky. Tomorrow, Brother Thomas will return. He will lift that quill again, steady and careful, and continue the endless story. Brother Alaric will add new flourishes, curling vines and bright petals, birds perched as if about to sing. Brother Gregor will prepare fresh ink, each swirl a prayer for clarity and patience. This life unfolds like an illuminated page, every detail tender, every margin blooming with quiet devotion. The hush of this place, the deep patience of its stones and echoes, holds you like a cradle, inviting you to breathe slower, to let your thoughts drift like candle smoke into the night. And so the night stretches on. Stars wheel overhead, pale, guardians watching this hidden world of quills and prayers. Somewhere far away, a bell might ring, a distant echo, but here, only your breath and the soft memory of ink. As you sink deeper into sleep tonight, imagine each dream as a line of script, each breath a new page. Let the hush of the monastery fold around you. In this world, there is no hurry, no sharp clang of swords, no shouts from distant battlements. Only the steady hush, the curl of ink on parchment, the sigh of a candle guttering in the small hours. Breathe, rest, you are safe here, cradled by centuries of slow, patient hands. Drift now, friend, into the softest depths of your own dreams. Let's now wander into a different time, a different place. Story 5. The silver combs and salted air, bathing rituals of Hayon Court. Ladies, good evening, gentle wanderer. You have left the monastery's silent corridors, and now find yourself standing beneath a different moon, in a different time. The night air here carries the scent of cedar, rice powder, and distant ocean breezes. You are in ancient Japan, the Heian period, where poetry drifted through courtly halls like perfume, and beauty was a careful art of breath and brush. Picture it, a wooden villa tucked behind delicate screens, nestled among groves of whispering bamboo. The villa's roof curves gently, dark tiles gleaming with morning dew. In the courtyard, stepping stones weave like a quiet poem between mossy rocks and small pools that mirror the sky. A thin veil of mist drifts above the shallow pond, and carp move beneath its surface in slow, golden arcs. Beyond the sliding paper doors, you hear the faint rustle of silk. It is early morning, and a lady of the court is just beginning her slow ritual of bathing and preparation. A daily ceremony as intricate as any dance. Each step a verse in her private poem of grace. Lady Michiko sits before a low mirror, its polished bronze surface capturing only a soft, moon-like reflection. She holds a comb carved from pale, fragrant boxwood. Her long hair, dark as a raven's wing, spills across the tatami mat like a quiet stream. With each stroke, she breathes out slowly, smoothing her thoughts along with each tangle. A servant kneels nearby, carefully warming water over a small charcoal brazier. The steam rises in delicate ribbons, carrying the gentle scent of pine needles and sweet herbs. The servant adds a few camellia petals to the basin, watching them swirl like tiny pink boats on a silent pond. The room is hushed, except for the small splash of water and the quiet sighs of cloth brushing against skin. Outside, sparrows call to one another among the bamboo, their voices like silver bells echoing in a dream. Lady Michiko dips a soft cloth into the warm water. She lifts it to her face, pressing it to her cheeks, her eyelids, her neck. Each touch is tender, as if she is greeting her own reflection anew. The warmth blooms across her skin, loosening the night's hush from her bones. Nearby, another servant prepares a small dish of rice bran nuka, used for gentle exfoliation. The fine grains shimmer like powdered moonlight in the lacquer dish. Lady Michiko rubs it between her fingers before patting it onto her face and neck. The soft, rhythmic motion feels like the echo of a lullaby, the grains carrying away the old skin, leaving only softness behind. After this gentle cleansing, she turns to a second basin of cool water. She dips her hands in, feeling the sharp, bright chill contrast the warmth. She lifts a handful and lets it pour down her wrists, watching the droplets run off like silver threads disappearing into the tatami. A delicate towel of bleached hemp is offered to her. She pats her skin dry, moving slowly, as though each touch is a brushstroke painting her morning calm. The towel smells faintly of sun and wind from the days it spent drying in the courtyard. As her hair finishes drying in the soft morning breeze, slipping through the screen doors, she reaches for a small pot of camellia oil. Her fingers move in slow, looping motions, distributing the oil from the crown to the tips, ensuring each strand gleams under the coming daylight. The ritual continues. A servant brings a small silver box containing finely ground incense powder. Lady Michiko gently dabs the powder along her neck and wrists, the fragrance rising around her like an invisible cloak, a whisper of sandalwood and distant mountains in a corner of the room. Her writing table sits with a fresh sheet of rice. Paper, a fine brush rests beside it, its tip sharp and ready, inkstone waiting patiently. Before the world's gaze, she is a lady of the court, a moving poem of grace and silk. But here, alone in this quiet dawn, she will compose small tonka poems about morning dew, the sadness of withering wisteria, or the fragile beauty of her dreams. She pauses after each verse, her gaze drifting to the garden where the koi flash like living jewels beneath the water's surface. A breeze stirs the bamboo leaves, a sound so soft it seems to slip between her thoughts without disturbing them. Another servant lays out layers of robes for the day. The undergarment kosode is soft, white, and smells faintly of plum blossoms. Over this, an underrobe of pale lavender silk slides across her shoulders with a gentle rustle, followed by layers in deeper hues of indigo, wisteria, and finally a thin outer robe of pale green, embroidered with silver cranes in flight. As each layer is added, Lady Michiko becomes a slow-moving landscape. Misty dawn, moonlit pond, drifting clouds, and a crane's silent glide, all woven into her form. Her attendants help her fasten each fold, arranging them so the colors ripple perfectly as she moves. The final touch, a comb of silver, delicately inlaid with mother-of-pearl cranes. It slides into her hair with a hushed click, the pattern shimmering like the first stars at dusk. Her hair, once loose and wandering, is now shaped into a smooth, elegant cascade. When she stands, the layers fall together in a sigh of silk, her figure now a living poem, each step measured and floating as though she moves above the earth itself. As she crosses the room, she passes a small altar dedicated to Kannon, the bodhisattva of compassion. She bows her head, her hands coming together. Softly, a single incense stick stands burning, its smoke rising in a thin, wavering column. She watches it for a moment, as though waiting for a silent reply, then continues her slow passage to the veranda. Outside, the morning has brightened into a gentle gold. A light breeze moves across the garden pond, creating small ripples that catch the sun. Lady Michiko steps onto the veranda, each footfall a whisper. She sits at the edge, the sleeves of her robe spilling around her like pooled water. She watches the koi glide beneath the surface, each fish a living stroke of orange and white, moving with a serenity that mirrors her own stillness. She folds her hands into her lap, her gaze softening as she listens to the bamboo clatter faintly in the breeze. A servant approaches quietly, offering a small tray with a porcelain cup of thin green tea and a delicate sweet made from rice and azuki bean paste. The tea's steam spirals upward, catching the light like a small ghost rising to the morning sun. Lady Michiko lifts the cup in both hands, her fingers curling gracefully around the rim. She takes a single sip, closing her eyes as the faint bitterness and warmth settle into her. The sweet follows, its delicate sweetness dissolving like a secret on her tongue. Beyond the garden walls, the distant calls of peddlers and the clatter of ox carts hint at the waking city of Heonkyo. But here, in this secluded courtyard, the world feels paused. The minutes stretched into silken threads woven softly around her. She remains on the veranda for some time, watching the light shift and dance across the pond, feeling the gentle rise and fall of her breath echo the pond's quiet ripples. Her mind drifts towards small poems yet to be written, letters she may send to friends at court, the next festival where she will admire moonlit blossoms with others cloaked in silk and scent. Eventually, she rises, her robes moving like an unfolding scroll. The servants gather around her, their heads slightly bowed, their steps echoing her slow rhythm. Together they move into the inner rooms, where new rituals await, calligraphy, practice, quiet poetry exchanges, preparation for evening gatherings. For now, though her morning bathing ritual has set the tone of her day, a dance of water, scent, silk, and silence. a gentle foundation upon which each delicate moment will be built, one careful breath at a time. As you lie beneath your own blankets tonight, imagine the hush of that room, the steam rising in curling tendrils, the rustle of silk over skin, the brush of a silver comb through dark hair. Let each sound and scent lull you, each detail a gentle hand smoothing the furrows from your brow. The courtly world of Heian Japan invites you not to rush, not to push or conquer, but simply to drift, like petals on a moonlit pond, like clouds over a quiet garden. The morning's hush lingers as the day begins to stir softly beyond the villa's walls. Lady Michiko sits once more at her writing table, a fine brush in her hand, her gaze floating beyond the translucent screen doors toward the courtyard pond. Single drop of ink hangs on the brush's tip, trembling like a tiny beetle poised on a blade of grass. She lowers it slowly to the rice paper, her breath slowing as the first character blooms. Each stroke is a delicate meditation, her wrist guiding the brush in small arcs, sometimes hesitating as though listening to an echo deep within her. She writes a few lines of a Tonka poem, pausing after each to lift her eyes to the drifting koi, or the soft waver of bamboo leaves. These pauses are not interruptions, but spaces of breath, moments where thought, memory, and the scent of the garden twined into something she alone can feel. After finishing the morning's writing, she carefully rolls the sheet and places it into a slender lacquer box. Later, a messenger will carry it to a distant friend, perhaps another lady in a villa shaded by plum trees, or a poet who will unfold her words beneath the moon and compose an answering verse. A servant approaches with her midday meal on a low, black lacquer tray, a small bowl of steamed rice, pickled plums, and a delicate serving of simmered vegetables. A thin porcelain cup holds clear broth, garnished with a single sprig of mitsuba leaf floating like a green star on a still pond. Lady Michiko lifts the chopsticks with both hands, bowing her head slightly before beginning. She moves without haste, each morsel raised as if it were a gift to the morning itself. The taste of each bite is quiet and clear, a gentle echo of the season's turn, a whisper of cool mountain streams, distant cedar groves, and the slow warmth of the late spring sun. Outside, a gardener kneels by the pond, arranging stones and trimming moss with careful fingers. His movements are so deliberate they seem like part of a silent ritual. Every so often, he pauses to admire the shimmer of a koi's scales or to watch a dragonfly drift just above the water's edge, near the villa's entrance. A small group of servants gather to polish the walkway stones. They move in gentle unison, water splashing lightly, brushes sweeping in slow, rhythmic arcs. The faint sound of their labor carries into Lady Michiko's room like a distant lullaby, blending seamlessly with the occasional rustle of the bamboo grove. When her meal is finished, Lady Michiko cleanses her hands with a warm, damp cloth offered on a shallow dish. The cloth is embroidered with a single crane, its wings outstretched in silent flight. She lifts it to her face for a moment, inhaling the faint scent of camellia and cedar. Now, her attendant brings out a wooden box of cosmetics and perfumes. Lady Michiko selects a fine white powder made from ground rice, which she dabs lightly across her forehead and cheeks with a small silk puff. The powder leaves her skin with a gentle, moonlit glow, a softness that seems to gather light rather than reflect it. Next, she applies a thin layer of bani, a bright red pigment drawn from safflower petals. She presses it lightly onto her lips, the color blooming like a shy camellia among winter snow. Each touch is slow, her mind focused not on the outcome but on the feeling of brush against skin, the sensation of color arriving softly in the day's quiet spaces. A small silver tray holds slender sticks of incense, each rolled with care, from sandalwood, a loose wood, and subtle blends of floral resins. She selects one and lights it with a glowing ember from the brazier. The first tendrils of smoke curl upward, spiraling in a delicate dance before slipping out through the screen doors into the courtyard air. This incense, called takemono, is chosen as much for its soundless movement as its fragrance, a drifting poem that cannot be written down. Lady Michiko closes her eyes, letting the scent roll over her like a wave, carrying memories of moon-viewing nights, early autumn rain, and moments of gentle laughter in dim corridors. As the morning transitions into early afternoon, Lady Michiko stands and moves to a larger sitting room where a gathering of close companions awaits. They arrive one by one, slipping silently across the polished wooden floors, each robe a moving garden of colors: pale peony pink, soft pine green, misty wisteria purple. When they greet one another, they bow deeply, long sleeves brushing the floor in fluid arcs. No words break the initial silence. The greeting itself is a poem, a soft moment of mutual recognition shaped by decades of tradition. Once seated, they exchange small scrolls, each bearing a poem composed the previous night. The poems are read aloud in soft voices, each syllable trailing into the next like moonlight on water. Lady Michiko listens intently, her eyes often closing as she absorbs the subtle shifts in meaning, the careful turns of emotion hidden within. The verses dot after each poem. There is a moment of silence, a shared breath, a quiet space where the words can settle into the heart. Then a gentle murmur of approval or a slow, knowing nod before the next scroll is unrolled. Between readings, they sip pale green tea from delicate cups, the fragrance as soft as the rustling of silk sleeves. The tea is slightly bitter, a taste that lingers on the tongue, inviting contemplation rather than indulgence. Small sweets, shaped like seasonal flowers, accompany the tea, their fragile sweetness balancing the tea's quiet austerity. Lady Michiko offers her own scroll last. Her companions listen closely, some tilting their heads slightly, their hands resting on folded knees. When she finishes, there is another deep pause, an almost imperceptible collective inhale. One lady presses her palm lightly to her chest, a gesture of shared emotion. The gathering drifts on in this gentle rhythm. Poems, sips of tea, silences that bloom like night flowers. Outside, the sunlight shifts across the veranda, casting patterns of light and shadow that move slowly, as though mirroring the ebb and flow of spoken words. Later, a servant quietly signals that the garden is ready for their stroll. Lady Mi and her companions rise, each movement precise and unhurried. They step out onto the veranda, the cool wood beneath their bare feet connecting them to the earth's quiet heartbeat. They descend to the mossy garden paths, pausing to admire irises blooming beside the pond, their slender petals trembling gently in the breeze. One lady leans down to study a fallen petal on a stone, tracing its curve with her fingertip as though reading a secret message. They move slowly, often stopping to observe small wonders: a spider weaving between bamboo stalks, the mirrored sky. In a shallow pool, the way a dragonfly hovers motionless before darting away. These details, so easily missed in the louder corners of the world, are treasures here, each one an unspoken verse in the ongoing poem of the day. When they return to the veranda, Servants offer small towels and bowls of cool water infused with plum blossom petals. The ladies dip their hands, feeling the sudden chill bloom across their skin. Towels are pressed to wrists and cheeks, drawing away the garden's warmth, leaving behind a delicate, bright refreshment. As the afternoon drifts into the mellow gold of early evening, the gathering slowly dissolves. One by one, the ladies bow and slip away, their robes leaving a soft echo of color in the corridor. Lady Michiko remains seated a moment longer, gazing across the now shadowed pond, the koi settling into deeper water for the night. A gentle breeze brushes against her cheek, and she lifts her hand as if to catch it, her fingers closing softly around nothing but air. In that moment, she feels the day's slow dance within her, the layered silks, the poems whispered into the hush, the fragrance of tea and incense weaving through every thought. She stands and returns indoors, her robes whispering against the floor like a gentle tide returning to sea. In her room, a servant prepares the evening basin, warm water mixed with salt drawn from the distant coast, believed to purify the spirit as well as the skin. Lady Michiko kneels beside it, dipping the cloth slowly, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers. She presses it to her face, then to her neck and shoulders. The salt water carries with it a memory of the ocean's hush, waves rolling beneath a moonlit sky, the low lullaby of distant tides. As she finishes, her hair is once again combed, the silver comb moving through it in smooth, moon-like arcs. She breathes deeply, her chest rising and falling like a quiet drum. Candles are lit one by one, their flames catching the evening light and multiplying it into small pockets of warmth. Lady Michiko moves toward her bed of layered silk and cotton quilts, pausing to look back at the faint glow in the garden beyond the screen. Tonight, perhaps, she will dream of mist rolling across the garden pond, or of a poem floating gently on a breeze, waiting to be caught and whispered in a friend's ear. As you lie under your own covers tonight, imagine the hush of her villa surrounding you, the drifting incense smoke, the hush of silk robes, the soft echo of water against skin. Let these images wash over you, each one a gentle tide carrying you further from the noise of the waking world. Tomorrow, Lady Michiko will rise once again to her slow ritual, the combs, the warm basins, the scent of camellia, and the quiet weaving of poetry through each breath. And you, dear friend, are always welcome to drift alongside her, moving softly in that hidden garden of dreams. The moon climbs higher over Heiankyo, painting silver threads across the rooftops and the ponds hidden behind screen walls. In Lady Michiko's villa, the hush of twilight lingers, each corner wrapped in a soft glow that seems to breathe in rhythm with the sleeping city beyond. In her private chamber, a single paper lantern flickers. Its light shivers against the wooden beams, casting long, gentle shadows that dance like drifting clouds on a still pond. Lady Michiko sits at her writing table once more, her long sleeves gathered in her lap. The air carries the delicate scent of camellia oil and smouldering incense, winding around her like a soft scarf against the cool night. Before her, a fresh sheet of rice paper waits a quiet field awaiting the careful planting of each word. Tonight, her brush feels lighter than usual, almost as if it floats of its own accord. The ink is smooth and dark, gliding across the paper with a quiet authority. She writes a tonka, each line a small, luminous stone dropped into the moonlit garden of her thoughts. Among the tall pines, moonlight spills on my comb, bright. Even my hair sighs, longing for the morning wind, a friend unseen. Far away, when she pauses to dry the ink, Her eyes drift to the sliding screens, where shadows of bamboo sway gently in the breeze. She listens to the distant call of an owl echoing from the grove, its voice as soft as a distant bell tolling in a dream. Once the poem is complete, she carefully folds the paper and tucks it into a slim envelope of cream-colored silk. Tomorrow, it will be sent to a distant friend, perhaps a lady confined to a villa on the far edge of the city, or a monk tending a quiet mountain temple. The thought of this poem traveling through the night, carried by unseen hands, comforts her, as though each word were a whispered breath sent to cradle a friend's lonely heart in the adjacent room. Her maidens prepare the final bath of a large wooden tub is filled with steaming water, infused with fragrant yuzu peels and sprigs of young pine. The citrus scent sharpens the air, blending with the pine's green hush, creating a scent that feels both waking and dreaming. At once Lady Michiko rises and glides toward the bath, each footstep deliberate, her sleeves whispering across the floor like a soft rain. As she disrobes, her layers of silk fall away in slow cascades, lavender, wisteria, pale blue, white each fold revealing a new shimmer. A new breath of moonlight on water. She steps into the tub with care, her breath catching as the warmth closes around her limbs like a gentle embrace. She sinks slowly, her hair pinned atop her head to keep it dry, though a few rebellious strands slip free and curl along her neck. The steam curls upward in ghostly ribbons, each twist reflecting the lantern's gentle flicker. Her maidens retreat, leaving her alone in this fragrant cocoon. The water laps softly against the tub's sides, and she closes her eyes, letting her mind drift beyond the villa walls. She imagines moonlight streaming through mountain pines, the hush of deep snow on temple steps, the pale blue flash of a heron rising from a riverbank at dawn. Each image unfurls in her mind like a scroll, each one layered with a softness that presses gently against her thoughts. When she finally rises from the water, her skin glows, each droplet shimmering like tiny pearls. A soft cloth is offered, and she dabs her skin slowly, savoring the warmth before it vanishes into the cool night air. Once dry, she dresses in a robe meant only for sleep, a simple white garment of the softest silk, the sleeves slightly shorter, the ties looser. Her hair is let down now, combed gently by her maidens. The silver comb slides through the strands like a moonbeam parting a midnight lake. Afterward, Lady Michiko moves to her bed, a platform layered with cotton quilts and soft mats. A thin gauze canopy hangs above, drifting slightly in the night, breeze that slips through the half-open screens. Before lying down, she kneels at a small altar set with a tiny bronze statue of Canon, the Bodhisattva of compassion. She lights a final incense stick, the smoke rising in a single line toward the ceiling, before dispersing into the room's gentle hush. She presses her forehead to the tatami mat, her hands folded delicately in front of her. Her whispered prayer is nearly inaudible, more an exhale than speech, words for those she loves, for distant friends, for safe dreams to gather in her sleep. Finally, she rises and slips beneath the quilts. Her maidens extinguish the lantern, leaving only the moonlight to brush across her face. Outside, the garden rests, coy drift like forgotten lanterns beneath the water. Bamboo leaves tremble under the faintest breath of wind, and somewhere among the moss stones, a small frog begins its lonely song. Lady Michiko lies still, her hands folded gently over her abdomen. She listens to her own breathing, slow and deep, each inhale carrying the scent of pine and yuzu. each exhale blending with the garden's breath beyond the screen. In her half-dreaming mind, she drifts through long moonlit corridors, past inks, brushes and half-finished poems, across garden stones slick with dew. She feels the rustle of her robes, hears the echo of distant laughter, and sees the small flutter of her own paper fans catching a night breeze. Somewhere in that drifting, she remembers a distant spring day, a festival when petals from 1,000 cherry blossoms rained like silent snow. She remembers the way her mother combed her hair that morning, each stroke a lullaby, each pin a soft promise. She recalls a small poem shared on that day, a verse about morning light on fresh petals, a longing for moments that fade like fragrance. On the wind, the memory floats past her mind like a pale koi beneath the moonlit pond surface. She reaches for it but feels only a cool ripple, and she lets it drift away, her breath deepening once more. Beyond the walls, Heonkyo continues its slow, nocturnal hum. Ox carts creak down distant streets, guards murmur at gates, an old poet scribbles by candlelight, a cat steps delicately across a neighbor's roof. Each small sound joins the city's secret song, an undercurrent beneath Lady Michiko's final thoughts before sleep. You, too, might imagine yourself wandering those garden paths tonight. Feel the soft moss beneath your feet, the hush of the koi beneath still water, the thin line of incense smoke fading into the stars. Perhaps you carry a scroll of your own verses, or a comb polished to a silver gleam dot in this world. There is no need for haste, no sharp demands. There is only breath, slow as moonlight drifting across water. Only moments stacked gently, like poems folded into silk envelopes. Lady Michiko sighs softly, her lips curving into a faint smile. Sleep drifts over her like the final layer of silk, weightless and warm. Her breath becomes a tide that ebbs and flows without sound. Tonight, her dreams may be filled with temple bells echoing through morning mist, or perhaps the slow unfolding of a single camellia under a pale spring sun. She may dream of an ink brush skimming paper endlessly, or of lanterns drifting on a dark river during a festival. Each flame a small floating wish. As you rest now, imagine her gentle world cradling you. The silver combs, smooth teeth, the hush of warm water on your skin, the rustle of layered silk sleeves sliding into stillness. Let each detail slow your own pulse, each imagined breath guiding you deeper into your own quiet garden of sleep. Here you are safe, held in the calm hush of an unseen hand, rocking you gently through the long moon-soaked night. Rest, friend. Dream softly. Let's now wander into a different time, a different place,